Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maricela Botella Valadez. Maricela Botella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, Washington. As the eldest of two children in a Latin American family, she was known for being a kind, outgoing young woman with many friends. She excelled in school and went on to attend a prestigious university after graduating. Maricela was a stunning young woman with a petite frame, long brunette hair, and big brown eyes. She was always the center of attention and loved being around people, often attending lively parties and making the most of every day. On October 3, 2020, Maricela traveled to Dallas to visit old friends, but she planned to return by Monday morning. Her brother was supposed to pick her up from the airport on October 5, and they would head to the university together. However, when the plane arrived, Maricela was nowhere to be found. A search for the missing student began when her brother realized she wasn't among the passengers who had disembarked from the flight. He tried to call her, but her phone was turned off. He then contacted their parents to inform them of the situation. Maricela's disappearance was unusual, as she was a responsible and serious young woman who would not normally miss university classes without warning. Maricela's family reached out to her friends in Dallas to gather information about her possible whereabouts and her last known location. Their efforts led them to a popular club in the city, where she was spotted partying with friends the night before her disappearance. While there, she had met a man named Chuck and they had danced and socialized together over drinks. After that, they of them left the club, and Maricela was not seen again. When her family was unable to reach her by phone, they grew extremely concerned and frightened, prompting them to quickly report her disappearance to the police. She had purchased tickets for a flight to Seattle, but she never boarded the plane. Her whereabouts since that night were unknown. To investigate further, it was crucial to identify the new person she had met, their destination, and whether she had left with them voluntarily. Reviewing surveillance footage from outside the club, authorities observed Maricela exiting with a young man, but his face was not clearly visible on the video. According to the footage, Maricela appeared to be walking with a man voluntarily before getting into a black Audi car and driving off in an unknown direction. Several days had passed since her disappearance, and she had not contacted anyone, logged into her social media accounts, or made any transactions on her bank cards. The police urgently needed to identify the stranger she was with to determine where to search for them. One of her friends reported that the companion might be named Chuck, but this information was not enough. However, street camera footage helped investigators determine the direction the car had traveled. Further review of supermarket security footage revealed that they had stopped to shop, appearing happy and affectionate towards each other. The footage showed Maricela selecting drinks and candies, while he paid for the items using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. It became clear that Maricela had left with Beltran, a 31-year-old musician who was gaining popularity as a local rap star. However, Beltran had a troubled past, having been to prison twice for robbery and armed assault. He had been released on parole after serving less than 3 years and was on the verge of releasing his own music album. An investigation revealed that Maricela's phone had been active at a specific location on the night she went missing. The location was linked to a house owned by a woman named Lisa Dyke, who was renting a room to Beltran. When police and an FBI agent investigating Maricela's disappearance visited the house, they found it empty. The police were only able to reach Lisa Dyke by phone, as she said she was out of state for work. She confirmed that Charles Beltran had been renting a room in her home, but claimed he had moved out about 2 weeks ago. She also stated that she had no idea where he was after that. They searched the house where he used to live and made several alarming discoveries. The interior was a disaster zone with mess and unsanitary conditions everywhere. It appeared as if the residents had departed abruptly, only taking essential belongings and abandoning the rest. Dirty dishes were stacked high in the sink, old food and mold sat on the kitchen table, and garbage covered the corners of the floor. In stark contrast, investigators found multiple empty bottles of cleaning supplies scattered around, and there were also remnants on the floor and carpet indicating an attempt to scrub areas clean. A disturbing black statue of death, draped in a black cloak and grasping a scythe, occupied one of the upstairs rooms. While it could have been dismissed as an eccentric decoration, its presentation as a makeshift altar, complete with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls, suggested a more sinister purpose. The setup bore an uncanny resemblance to the Mexican cult of Santa Muerte, which reveres a female embodiment of death. The house exuded an atmosphere of foreboding, as if a traumatic event had occurred, prompting the occupants to hastily gather their belongings and flee in a state of panic. A more thorough investigation was conducted using specialized tools to detect blood traces. This revealed multiple wiped blood stains in one of the bedrooms, the bathroom, and the hallway. The bedroom with the most significant bloodstains belonged to Charles, suggesting a violent crime had occurred there. However, the identity of the victim remained unclear. Despite attempts to clean the area, the blood had penetrated the carpet, seeped under the baseboards, and stained the wallpaper and furniture. To confirm the source of the blood, experts compared the samples with Morella's DNA. The results eliminated any remaining doubts, confirming that the blood belonged to Morella. The police had to seal the house as a crime scene, but their next challenge was to track down the main suspect, potential accomplices, and witnesses. However, this proved to be a difficult task as Charles had already fled the scene, and the owner had quickly put the house up for sale even before the police arrived. To gather more information, the police decided to investigate the people who had recently lived in the house. According to the neighbors, who described a complicated love triangle, 3 individuals had lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, the nature of their relationships and the reason for their sudden disappearance remained unclear. To move forward with the investigation, the police needed to look into each person's background and find them as soon as possible for questioning. The owner of the house, who was the only one reachable by phone, was a well-known lawyer with a commanding and ambitious personality. She had been married 3 times and had inherited a substantial amount of money after becoming a widow several years ago. Given her financial situation, it was unclear why she had rented a room to Charles, as she was not known for her charitable nature, suggesting that she may have had an ulterior motive. Charles Beltran, also known as Chuck, had big dreams of becoming a successful rapper. However, his lack of funds and connections, combined with a troubled past, made it difficult for him to get started. That was until he met Dyke, who offered him a helping hand. She took him in, setting up a small recording studio in her home, and even funded the production of several music videos to help launch his career. Dyke also provided Chuck with a car, paid for his social expenses, and bought him stylish clothing. Despite her significant financial investment in Chuck, Dyke maintained that their relationship was purely professional, insisting that she saw great potential in the young rapper and was simply investing in his future. The situation with Nina Morano was particularly interesting. She had been in a long-term relationship with Lisa, and after Lisa's husband passed away, they women no longer hid their romance. In fact, they had gotten married just a few months prior. Nina moved in with Lisa, who was already living with a young musician named Charles. Although Lisa denied it, a close friend claimed that she had a romantic relationship with Charles, and Lisa had even confided in her friend about how great he was as a lover. It seemed that Lisa was deeply in love with Charles, as evidenced by her efforts to look younger, including losing 55 pounds, changing her image, wearing bright makeup, and getting tattoos. Lisa had also made some significant changes to her life, including evicting her adult children from the home, citing that they were interfering with her personal life. Charles, on the other hand, had a clear interest in staying with Lisa, who who was wealthy and could help him financially and advance his music career. However, as a physically attractive man, Charles often engaged in casual flings with young women, which made Lisa extremely jealous. But what was Nina Morano's role in all of this, and specifically, what did she have to do with Morella's disappearance? According to a close friend, Lisa's spouse, Na, was also involved in the unusual love triangle with Lisa and he. Na was a successful lawyer and a wealthy woman. The three of them lived a life of luxury together. After they got married, both women took his last name, Beltran, and the three of them lived together in the house. But what happened to the people who lived in the house where Morella's blood was discovered? After Morella disappeared, no one was seen at home again. Lisa was contacted once and answered a few questions, claiming she was in another state, but her phone was unreachable after that. There was no information about Na's whereabouts or the main suspect, Charles. On the night of October 5th, investigators monitored the mobile phone signals of the three residents and the missing person, Maricela, and found that all four signals were coming from within the house. By early morning, the signals had moved to a remote wooded area in suburban Dallas. Shortly after, the signals vanished. A few days later, Lisa briefly responded to messages on her secondary work phone, but it soon became unreachable as well. Using geolocation data from the mobile devices, authorities reconstructed the group's route that night, identifying the stops they made along the way. This information led them to suspect that the missing student's body might have been disposed of in this area. Although this narrowed down the search radius, the area was vast and challenging to navigate, hindering the progress of the investigation. The search for the missing Seattle student was suspended near the new year, as no body or clues were found. However, in March 2021, a local hunter discovered a human skull in the woods that appeared to be relatively recent. The hunter immediately reported the find to the police, who then sent the remains to a forensic laboratory for examination. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to the missing student, who had been gone for nearly 6 months. Although the body was badly decomposed and damaged by wild animals, making it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, forensic analysis revealed characteristic marks on the bones that suggested knife wounds. However, it was unclear whether these wounds were fatal. After the authorities found the body in the forest, they quickly identified the first suspects and tracked down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with her partner, Na. They had rented a house in Miami near the ocean. However, when the police arrived, only Na was apprehended, while Lisa went into hiding after learning about the situation. Charles, another suspect, was nowhere to be found, although he occasionally contacted his former girlfriends through messaging apps. In one of his last messages, Charles warned his acquaintances that the police were closing in and that they should be extremely careful. Meanwhile, Na, who was now in custody, denied any involvement in Maricela's disappearance, claiming she knew nothing about what had happened to her. Lisa, on the other hand, used her connections to try to hire a good lawyer for Na. While in Florida, Na attempted to sell her house in South Carolina as quickly as possible, likely to raise funds for their continued hiding or to flee the country. Authorities eventually tracked down Lisa and arrested her, and both women were taken back to Dallas. During initial questioning, neither woman provided any information, and their bail was set at $500,000 each. They were able to post bail and were released to house arrest, but were required to wear tracking devices that allowed authorities to monitor their movements. In August of the same year, Charles made a daring escape attempt, but police were hot on his trail and tracked him down to Utah, where he was hiding at the home of a former girlfriend. She, who had a 5-year-old son with Charles, was overjoyed to see him and didn't ask questions about his sudden return. When Charles was arrested, he initially refused to cooperate with the police or answer their questions. He was counting on his wealthy lover to use her influence and wealth to hire a top-notch lawyer to get him out of trouble. However, things took a dramatic turn on Christmas Eve in 2021. Lisa and Nina, who had been released on bail, suddenly went dark when their tracking bracelet stopped working due to the holiday chaos and high activity. The police didn't send a team to the suspect's location until the next day, but by then, they had already vanished. It was later discovered that the suspects had been carefully planning their escape for months. As a result, by the time the police pursued them, they had already crossed the border into Mexico undetected. From Mexico, they traveled to South Korea by air, and their trail eventually went cold in Cambodia. The FBI teamed up with the Cambodian police and immigration authorities to locate the suspects on the run. They women first raised suspicions after making a large cash withdrawal from an ATM, prompting authorities to monitor their movements. They tried to pay for everything in cash to stay under the radar, but security footage helped reveal their whereabouts. An ATM camera identified the fugitives, and another camera caught the license plate of the vehicle they arrived in. The vehicle's owner cooperated with police and took them to the residence where the foreign women were living extravagantly. They were recaptured in February 2022 and sent back to the United States, where they were taken into custody without the possibility of bail, ensuring they went directly to jail to face the law. Charles realized that his lover was only looking out for herself and had no intention of helping him avoid prison. This led him to decide to cooperate with the investigation and share information. His detailed account of the events that took place that night shocked many. Belen admitted to being in a romantic relationship with Lisa, the homeowner, and her spouse, Na, but claimed it was motivated by financial gain and a desire to further his music career. He did not have genuine feelings for these women and instead often pursued younger, attractive women, openly engaging in numerous affairs. On October 5, 2020, Chuck met Maricela, a young student, at a nightclub. They spent the evening drinking and dancing together, and he eventually invited her back to his place. Maricela agreed, and when they arrived, Chuck's roommates, Na and Lisa, were already asleep. Chuck and Maricela went to his room, where they engaged in intimate activities and fell asleep. Later that night, Lisa woke up and entered Chuck's room, where she saw Maricela sleeping next to him. This triggered a jealous outburst, and Lisa went to the kitchen to grab a large knife. She then returned to Chuck's room and attacked Maricela, repeatedly striking her with the knife. Charles reported that he was woken up by a noise and was initially disoriented due to intoxication. When he turned on the light, he was met with a disturbing scene. Marella's body had fallen to the floor beside the bed, where she had lost a significant amount of blood. Na entered the room, and both Charles and Na stood there for a few minutes, failing to provide any assistance to the victim. Once Charles regained his composure, he realized that he might be blamed for the crime due to his prior record, and that his influential acquaintances might avoid punishment. He claimed that this is why he agreed to help dispose of the body and conceal the crime. Charles stayed with friends for several days and, upon returning to collect his belongings, noticed that the blood stains on the floor and carpet had almost completely disappeared. Lisa informed him that she and Na had taken care of everything and destroyed the evidence of the crime. The three individuals involved decided it was best to leave town for a while and observe from a distance what would happen next. Lisa Dyke-Bell's defense team argued that she had no motive to harm she. According to her lawyer, Lisa's relationship with Chuck was purely professional, and she saw his music career as a valuable investment. She claimed that his personal relationships and interactions with others did not concern her. A key point made by her defense was that Lisa had recently gotten married to Moran and was happy in her relationship. However, it was unclear why she and her wife had decided to take the surname of their young lodger, Charles, after their wedding, despite claiming he was insignificant to them. During the trial, Lisa portrayed Charles as hot-tempered and cruel, especially when intoxicated, and stated that she feared him. Lisa's account of the events that night claims that Chuck brought a new woman home from the club, but their encounter turned violent when an argument broke out. Chuck allegedly grabbed a knife in a fit of rage. Lisa and Nina intervened, trying to separate they, but it was too late. Maricela was already dead. Chuck then coerced Lisa and Nina into helping him dispose of the body and clean up the crime scene, threatening to harm them if they didn't comply. However, a witness who testified in court, a friend of Lisa's, painted a different picture. According to the friend, Lisa was intensely fixated on Chuck and had often expressed a desire to get rid of any woman who got close to him. The friend suggested that Lisa's emotions got the better of her that night. The friend also mentioned a peculiar detail, a statue of Santa Muerte in Lisa's home, which was part of an improvised altar. Lisa had jokingly told her friend that she was into black magic and knew how to cast a spell to make a man loyal only to her. The ritual apparently did not work as planned, and she turned to using a knife instead. A real estate agent who was approached by the women shortly after the incident testified that they were desperate to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible. They also wanted to put their home in Dallas up for sale, but were unable to do so while the investigation was ongoing because the house was a crime scene. The situation took a turn for the worse when the remains of she were found. At this point, Lisa and Nina were willing to sell the property at a significantly reduced price, just to get the money quickly. During the trial, the court considered Charles's full confession and his cooperation with the investigation. However, things took a turn for the worse for the fugitives after they attempted to flee to another continent. In March 2023, Lisa Dyke Beltran was convicted of a heinous crime against 23-year-old Maricela, as well as tampering with evidence and attempting to escape. She received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. Charles Beltran and Nina Morin, on the other hand, pleaded guilty and cooperated with the investigation. They were found guilty of concealing evidence. Nina received a 7-year prison sentence, but may be eligible for release in 3 years if she exhibits good behavior. Charles, who had prior convictions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 8 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin Craft. Christina Rose Carlin Craft was born on November 11, 1983, in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Craft and Dawn Carlin. From a young age, she enjoyed being in front of the camera, whether it was being photographed or videotaped. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City. Although she had a stable job, her true aspiration was to become a model. Christina's determination eventually paid off, and she achieved some success in the modeling industry. In her promotional materials, she expressed her love for posing in elegant lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend Christina met while working on a 3-day photo shoot for Maxim magazine, Christina was a charming and beautiful person with a great sense of humor. With her dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the qualities of a fashion model. Christina's ultimate goal was to appear on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while still working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, Christina met Alex Caiatelli, and they soon began dating. Alex supports Christina's ambitions and never hindered her career. They got engaged after a long relationship. During this time, Christina became Cyber Girl of the Month in May 2009, earning an invitation to the Playboy Mansion, where she attended exclusive events and experienced luxury. At the height of her career, Christina's ambitions soared, particularly after meeting Hugh Hefner. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, she failed to secure a modeling contract with Playboy magazine, a highly competitive opportunity that only one girl among thousands of applicants can attain. Christina faced significant obstacles in becoming a top model at that time. One major issue was her age. At 26, she was considered too old for certain magazines that typically feature younger models. Despite this, she continued to work hard, landing jobs with prominent companies like Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, and Vanity Fair. Determined to advance her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, her decision to pose for Playboy proved to be a setback. Many brands were hesitant to work with her after the explicit photo shoot, and her career began to decline. Eventually, it came to a complete halt. It was a challenging time for Christina, but she was grateful to have Alex's support to help her through it. Christina was a woman known for both her physical beauty and her controversial behavior. In 2016, she caused a disturbance at the Smith, a New York restaurant. Following the incident, the New York Post published several articles about what had happened. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin Craft, 34, was dining at the Smith with a male friend on March 6 when an argument broke out over the bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager, Sergei Anikin, intervened. Christina, who was reportedly intoxicated, claimed the manager had pushed her, but a video of the incident showed that was not true. During the altercation, Christina allegedly hit a police officer on the neck, causing redness and significant pain. She was subsequently charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, after the district attorney offered her a deal, the charges were dropped on the condition that she stayed out of trouble for 6 months. Christina's lawyer explained that she accepted a reasonable deal offered by the district attorney. Christina had always been fond of Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, where she felt a strong sense of safety. Considering this, Alex purchased an apartment for her in Ardmore, and they of them relocated to Pennsylvania in 2018. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore did not live up to her expectations of being a safe haven. In fact, on August 18, 2018, she reported a robbery to the police. Christina spent the evening at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night are hazy. The next morning, she woke up with no recollection of how she got home or if anyone was with her. She suspected that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. Feeling scared, she confided in others about her concerns. Her partner, Alex, was away on a business trip at the time, which added to her anxiety. The police investigation into the incident uncovered CCTV footage that showed a car arriving at Christina's apartment building around 3 a.m. The footage revealed that Christina was unconscious in the back seat. The driver, who was later identified as the perpetrator, took Christina's keys from her purse and entered her apartment. Once inside, the thief stole over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer handbags, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The perpetrator spent about an hour and a half in Christina's apartment before returning to the car. He then helped Christina out of the vehicle and into her apartment building, leaving her in the hallway. The thief put the keys back in Christina's purse and drove away, leaving her disoriented and frightened. The police were able to identify the perpetrator of the robbery with the help of a credit card statement. The culprit was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. At the time of the robbery, Melton was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with a Virginia license plate. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17, a sighting confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. As the police searched for Melton and worked to recover Christina's stolen belongings, a far more serious crime occurred. On August 22, 2018, Alex Caiatelli called the police to ask them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin Craft, as he was unable to contact her. When he arrived home, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. A review of the security system revealed that someone had opened the front door and balcony door overnight. The police were forced to break down the front door to gain entry. Upon entering the apartment, they immediately discovered a crime scene, with a body on the bed covered in a blanket and blood visible. Christina Carlin Craft's brutally beaten body was discovered under a blanket. She had suffered severe injuries, including a broken nose and strangulation marks on her neck. When Christina's identity was confirmed, the news of her death was devastating to Alex. As the police investigated further, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Alex might be involved in her murder. After all, the closest people to the victim are often the prime suspects. Christina and Alex had a long history together, and anything could have happened between them. The fact that Alex had called the police to express his concern about Christina, only to have her body discovered shortly after, raised suspicions. It was possible that Alex had staged his concern to divert attention from himself. The detectives asked him to accompany them to the police station for questioning, and Alex agreed without hesitation. Alex told investigators he had to return to New York for urgent work on August 21st. On August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to say goodnight, but she didn't answer. Since Christina was always awake at that hour, Alex grew concerned. He called her several more times, but got no response. He then checked the security system and found suspicious activity at the apartment that night. Alex decided to put his business on hold and return to Ardmore immediately. The police believed Alex's story and ruled him out as a suspect, as it was impossible for him to be in two places at once. His alibi checked out, and the police cleared him of any involvement in Christina's death. The main suspect in Christina's murder was initially Andre Melton, who had previously stolen valuables from her apartment. It's possible that he returned to the apartment to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Alternatively, he may have discovered that she had reported him to the police and sought revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was discovered, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his residence, they found some of Christina's belongings, but Melton was nowhere to be found. However, surveillance footage from the night of the crime revealed that Christina had returned to her apartment with an unknown man at 3:08 a.m., but it wasn't Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage showed that the unknown man did not leave the apartment. To investigate further, police reviewed CCTV footage from the streets of Ardmore and discovered that Christina had visited a bar in Philadelphia before returning to her apartment. At the bar, investigators found footage of Christina meeting a man who later hugged her, the same man she had returned to her apartment with. Christina and a new acquaintance hailed a taxi after leaving the bar. Detectives tracked her movements to rebuild the timeline of events leading up to her death. They eliminated Melton as a suspect since he wasn't with her that day. They still had to determine if her death was connected to the earlier robbery or just a coincidence. On August 25th, the police got a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who drove Christina and her companion that night. He reported that Christina and her friend had approached him, and they didn't use the taxi app. After agreeing on a fare, they got into the taxi. According to Sanford, the couple seemed affectionate and friendly, so they didn't raise any suspicions. Sanford also remembered that when they arrived at their destination, Christina took the initiative to settle the fare. However, she didn't have any cash on her. She offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford refused. Then, Christina's friend offered him $100 if he would wait 10 to 15 minutes near the house while they went to the apartment. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her friend returned. Christina and the man entered their apartment around 3 a.m. At 4 a.m., Christina made a brief call to her cousin, but didn't speak a word. Her cousin, however, heard a man in the background instructing Christina not to call the police. The call ended abruptly, leaving the cousin unclear about what was happening. The police later determined the timeline of the crime using the apartment's door sensors, which recorded the exact times the doors were opened. The data showed that the first door opening occurred at 3:08 a.m. and the next at 5:10 a.m. Since the apartment was on the second floor, the investigators suspected that the perpetrator had left through the sliding glass door on the balcony, which was also detected by the security system around the same time. This explained why the surveillance cameras did not capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left the apartment. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment. Based on this information, the police theorized that the perpetrator escaped by jumping off the balcony. The investigation's next step was to seek the public's help through the media. After releasing the surveillance camera images, the authorities asked anyone with information to come forward. The photos showed two individuals, Andre Melton and the second person who was at Christina's apartment on the night of her death. Surprisingly, Andre Melton called the police by himself, admitting to stealing from Christina but denying involvement in her murder. On August 26, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects in the recent crime. The caller revealed that he had shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. According to the caller, the suspect had previously assaulted a woman in Love Park and molesting her. The suspect became aggressive, shouting and causing a disturbance, and was eventually hospitalized for 2 hours at a cost of $70. However, he was not identified. The caller provided more chilling information. The suspect had bragged about strangling a woman and felt proud and satisfied by the act. This new information convinced investigators that the suspect was likely responsible for the murder of Christina Carlincraft. The police received another call from a Philadelphia relative of the suspect, who identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, a convicted felon with a history of robbery. Harris had been released from prison on July 15, just 5 weeks before Christina's murder. After studying the suspect's entire biography, it became clear that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no prior connection and had never met. As a result, the police ruled out any link between their crimes. Additionally, the police gained access to Harris's phone messages. On August 22, he texted a friend that he had met an attractive woman and was going to her apartment. On August 28, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris. It was essential to apprehend him as soon as possible, as no one knew what he might do next. However, Harris had left no trail. When investigators contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, she revealed that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. As it turned out, Harris was already on the bus when the conversation took place. The Ardor police were unable to act, and the officers wouldn't be able to catch up with him. The Pittsburgh police were their last hope. Timing was crucial, and the police investigating Christina's death contacted the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They informed the task force of the bus's expected arrival time in Pittsburgh and shared a photo of Harris, helping them plan a strategic ambush. The officers blocked off all potential escape routes and were prepared to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. As the bus approached, one of the employees spotted Harris and allowed him to disembark calmly, reducing the likelihood of panic or chaotic behavior. About 10 minutes later, a police officer intercepted Harris. Harris gave a false name when asked to identify himself. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where detectives from Philadelphia interrogated him about his involvement in Christina's case. Harris claimed that he met Christina at a bar or nightclub, where she was alone, and he approached her. He admitted to being under the influence of both illegal substances and alcohol at the time. After chatting and having a drink, Christina invited him to her place. Once they arrived, Harris asked the taxi driver to wait, intending to return shortly. However, he ended up staying with Christina, and they drank multiple bottles of wine together. He claimed that they then engaged in an intimate relationship with mutual consent and used a prohibited substance. Afterward, Harris demanded that Christina pay him $1,200, which she refused. The situation escalated into a physical altercation when Christina allegedly hit Harris with a wine bottle. In response, Harris claimed he hit her in the face, causing her to fall to the floor. When Christina attempted to call for emergency assistance, Harris strangled her with sweatpants until she lost consciousness. Despite his account, several inconsistencies were found in his story. During the toxicology examination, experts found no prohibited substances in Christina's body, only alcohol. This contradicted the suspect's initial claim that he had only hit her once. When confronted with the results, Harris admitted to lying. Harris initially tried to convince detectives of his innocence, claiming Christina was fine when he left her apartment. However, during a subsequent interrogation, he fully confessed to his guilt. He explained that he had panicked after severely beating her, leaving her while she was still breathing, and covering her with a blanket to avoid the sight. Ultimately, Jonathan Harris confessed to taking Christina's life and attempting to escape detection by jumping off the balcony. Despite his earlier confession, Harris pleaded not guilty at the trial. Nevertheless, the investigators had gathered substantial evidence, making it impossible for Harris and his lawyer to win the case. The court was expected to sentence Jonathan Harris to 22 to 40 years in prison for the crime of third-degree life deprivation. However, the large amount of evidence presented by the prosecutors convinced the court that the crime was intentional, making life imprisonment a possibility. During the trial, a key witness testified against Harris. This witness had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic and had previously reported Harris to the police. Harris had confessed to the crime while in the clinic, telling the witness that he enjoyed the feeling of squeezing someone and watching them take their last breath. In the end, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to 30 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge handed down an additional 22 to 45-year sentence to Harris. The lengthy sentence was intended to send a message to future authorities who might consider granting him early release or pardon. In a separate case, Andre Melton was arrested in December 2018 and charged with burglarizing Carlin Craft's apartment. He was sentenced in March 2020 to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, totaling 7 years under court supervision. Before receiving his sentence, Melton apologized to Carlin Craft's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cassie Farrington. Born on December 22, 1990 in Virginia, Cassie Marie Brooks was the second oldest of 4 children to Chuck and Darlene Brooks. She excelled in school, became a member of the National Honor Society, participated in sports, and aspired to become a doctor. However, everything changed when she got pregnant at 16. She had to adjust her plans, and in 1 month, she graduated from high school, gave birth, married Bradley Farrington, and moved out of her parents' house. Years later, Cassie had a second child, but her marriage began to deteriorate. At 22, she got divorced. With her 2 children, she lived in Silver City, a town where she worked as a nurse at a local hospital and rented a place from a coworker. By the time Cassie turned 23, she had entered a new romantic relationship with a man named David Barry. He quickly formed a strong bond with her 2 children, which brought her great joy. Cassie and David took their time building a life together, and she was thrilled to report to her family and colleagues that he brought happiness and stability to both her and the kids. On March 24, 2014, Cassie phoned her parents after finishing her night shift at Silver City Hospital. During their conversation, she outlined her plan for the morning, driving home, picking up the kids, taking them to school, and then returning home to rest for a few hours before picking them up again later that day. Cassie was supposed to pick up her kids from school, but she didn't show up even after their classes had finished. School staff tried to reach her, but couldn't, so they called her parents. Her mother, Darlene, tried to call her too, but there was no answer. Darlene thought maybe Cassie had just overslept after working a night shift, so she asked Sherelle, Cassie's landlord, to check on her. Sherelle went to the house, knocked on the door, and called out Cassie's name, but got no response. She then went around to the back door, looked through the window and saw water pouring out of the bathroom into the kitchen. Cherelle knocked on the door again, louder this time, and shouted Cassie's name, still with no response. She used her own key to unlock the door and entered the house, where she heard the sound of running water getting louder. As she walked through the wet kitchen towards the bathroom, she continued to call out Cassie's name, her voice starting to shake. When she finally saw Cassie, her worst fears were confirmed. Cassie's body lay face down in the overflowing bathtub, water still pouring out. Cherelle found her and pulled her out of the water, placing her on the floor. Unfortunately, it was too late to try CPR, her body indicating Cassie had been dead for several hours. Cherelle quickly called 911 to report the situation, and paramedics and police were dispatched to the house. She also had the difficult task of informing Cassie's parents of their daughter's passing. While waiting for help to arrive, Cherelle searched the house and discovered another bathtub, also overflowing with running water, suggesting a possible accident or intentional act. The tub had a feature to prevent overflow, so the extra water flowed into the drain instead of spilling onto the floor. Cherelle noticed that the towel rack, which was previously mounted on the wall, was now lying on the floor, having been torn off. Meanwhile, Chuck and Darlene, who lived in Arizona, immediately dropped everything and traveled to Silver City after receiving the news. A couple of hours after receiving the devastating news, Cassie's parents arrived at the house where her body had been found. The police were already on the scene, and they noticed that there was no evidence of break-in. The doors and windows were locked, and the glass was intact. Additionally, valuable items that might have attracted a thief were left untouched. The police chief's first question to Cassie's parents was whether their daughter had been suicidal or had any reason to take her own life. Cassie's parents, Chuck and Darlene, were adamant that their daughter would never do such a thing, especially not with young children depending on her. Despite their protestations, the police chief repeated his suggestion that Cassie's death was likely a deliberate act. The police investigation was remarkably brief, lasting only a few hours, which struck Cassie's parents as unusual. Typically, the police take days to thoroughly examine the scene of a tragedy. In this case, they seemed eager to wrap things up quickly, even telling Cherelle that she could reuse the house soon. This hasty approach only added to Cassie's parents' growing unease, prompting them to decide to investigate the house themselves. When Cassie's parents drained the bathtub, they were surprised to find water still in it. They also discovered a series of black streaks on the tub's sides, similar to the marks left by rubber-soled shoes on the floor in various areas. Additionally, they found Cassie's glasses, hairband, and a coat hanger. Given these discoveries and the lack of fingerprint evidence collected by the police, Chuck and Darlene suspected that the authorities might be trying to quickly close Cassie's case as non-criminal. However, a call to the district attorney's office prompted the police to appear more diligent in their investigation. The medical examiner's report ultimately prevented the case from being closed. It revealed that Cassie's body had multiple bruises, including those on her neck. The forensic medical examiner concluded that her death was a homicide caused by an unspecified mechanism of injury. Unfortunately, the crime scene was no longer of significant use due to the property owner's subsequent cleanup and renovations. As a result, the police were unable to uncover new leads, leaving Cassie's parents with no updates on the case for months. David Barry, who had been in contact with Cassie before her death, was quickly cleared as a suspect due to his solid alibi. As time went on, Cassie's parents, Chuck and Darlene, grew increasingly frustrated with the local police, feeling they were not doing enough to investigate their daughter's death. After meeting with the chief district attorney, Chuck and Darlene requested that action be taken against Detective Jose Sanchez, who was handling the case. The district attorney reviewed the case file and agreed that Sanchez had made several mistakes. As a result, Sanchez was removed from the case and a more experienced detective was assigned. The new detective focused on the person Cassie's family and close friends had suspected from the start, her ex-husband, Bradley Farrington. Cassie and Bradley were in a bitter dispute over their children's custody at the time of her death. Given the court's likely ruling, it's probable that the children would have remained with their mother. Bradley stood to gain the most from Cassie's death, as it would grant him custody of the children and release him from his child support obligations. Bradley Farrington became a suspect in Cassie's death investigation. Having quit the force just months prior, Bradley had a motive for the crime. Moreover, his law enforcement background gave him the necessary expertise to manipulate the investigation and conceal evidence. Unfortunately, the bathwater had erased any potential DNA evidence and destroyed the shoe prints on the floor. Any incriminating evidence that may have linked Bradley Farrington to the crime scene was irreparably lost due to the incompetence of the local police. The only remaining option to hold Bradley accountable was through eyewitness accounts. Cassie told her parents that Bradley had often been abusive to her and the children, and that he had even mocked her, suggesting she try to report him to the police. As a Silver City police officer at the time, he felt invincible and above the law. It's heartbreaking to imagine Cassie's desperation, knowing she couldn't seek help from the police because her abusive husband's friends were part of the force. At her workplace, she confided in coworkers about Bradley's threats, including his chilling warning that he would make her disappear and no one would ever know. But in the end, 19 months later, on October 23, 2015, Bradley Farrington was arrested and charged in connection with her death. Bradley stood trial for Cassie's murder. At the trial, the prosecution presented multiple witnesses, including Cassie's parents, friends, and coworkers, who all testified about the abuse Cassie had suffered at the hands of her police officer husband. Additionally, Dr. Michael Hunter, a leading forensic expert from San Francisco, testified, assessing the conclusions drawn by local experts. Hunter, an experienced professional with over 20 years in his field, presented autopsy photographs to the jury and concluded that Cassie's neck injuries suggested she was likely strangled to death. Former Detective Sanchez, who initially handled the case before retiring, was subpoenaed to testify in court. He stated that he never considered Bradley Farrington a suspect during the initial investigation, as there was no evidence to warrant it. Sanchez also revealed that no fingerprints were collected from the crime scene. Sanchez expressed his suspicion that the crime scene had been intentionally cleaned up after the fact, which would explain why no fingerprints were found. After deliberating for 4.5 hours, the jury found Bradley Farrington guilty on September 7, 2018, and sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. In 2020, Farrington appealed his conviction to the New Mexico Supreme Court. He argued that the trial court had improperly allowed friends, family members, and co-workers of the victim to testify about statements Cassie made regarding his threats and acts of domestic violence. The state's highest court has upheld Bradley's conviction, ruling that there was sufficient evidence to support it. The court also rejected Bradley's appeal against the hearsay testimony that was allowed during his trial. Bradley is currently serving his sentence in prison. His children are now in the care of his parents, who are restricting their contact with the family of the victim. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katie Sepich. Katie Sepich's mom described her as an outgoing, vibrant, and intelligent 22-year-old. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, Katie was the eldest of 3 siblings. She earned a business degree from New Mexico State University and was planning to pursue her MBA in the fall. In addition to her studies, Katie worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, she met Joe Bischoff, and their initial friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. Katie confided in her mom, Diane, about her happiness with Joe and her desire to build a future together. Months later, Joe proposed to Katie with a diamond ring, making her dreams seem within reach. However, after they graduated in the summer of 2003, their relationship began to struggle. They faced challenges when Katie decided to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city 350 miles from Las Cruces. Katie was devastated when Joe had to leave, making their long-distance relationship extremely difficult. Despite the challenges, they found ways to reunite occasionally. One such opportunity arose on Labor Day weekend in 2003, when Joe visited Katie and Katie was ecstatic. However, their reunion took a devastating turn. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Katie enjoyed a fun night out with Joe and their friends, visiting several bars before ending up at a local house party. But after that, Katie vanished. The next day, Katie's mother, Jayan, received a life-changing phone call. Jayan recalled the moment she discovered her daughter was missing. She described how, on August 31st, 2003, her family had woken up to a beautiful day filled with friends and family, as they prepared to celebrate Labor Day weekend with a cookout. Then, at 2:15 that afternoon, the phone had rung, Veronica asking if they had talked to Katie that day. Veronica, Katie's roommate, was frantically calling everyone who knew Katie, trying to find out if they had seen her. She had already contacted all of Katie's friends and even checked with local hospitals, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. According to Veronica, Katie had left a party alone the previous night. Veronica and her boyfriend Joe had stayed behind and fallen asleep at the party house. They assumed Katie had gone home, but when they woke up the next morning, Katie was nowhere to be found. Katie's family immediately notified the police and filed a missing persons report. Shortly after, a disturbing discovery was made near a desert landfill. A deceased female body, partially undressed and exhibiting clear signs of a recent and intentional murder. The police were called to the scene and found no identification near the body. However, they could tell that the body had been there for no more than a day. The victim appeared to be between 20 and 25 years old, and the fact that she was naked from the waist down suggested that the motive behind the crime was likely sexual. The victim's body showed signs of strangulation, leading investigators to initially suspect it as the cause of death. Upon closer inspection, they noticed no signs of struggle near the body, indicating that she likely died elsewhere and was moved to the desert landfill to delay discovery. Further examination revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting the perpetrator attempted to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting her on fire. The police soon connected the dots between Katie's disappearance and the unidentified body. Katie's father was tasked with identifying the body at the morgue, an experience that left him and his wife, Gianna, shattered. The body was their daughter, Katie. The police's first step was to interview Katie's roommate, Veronica, and her boyfriend, Joe. It was unusual that they stayed at the party while Katie left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, claiming that Katie had left her belongings behind. The detective retraced Katie's likely route, knocking on doors and speaking with residents, hoping to gather information. Unfortunately, no one reported seeing or hearing anything unusual. However, one discovery suggested that Katie may have reached her house but never entered it. Katie left her house without her keys. The investigator found her shoes outside her bedroom window, suggesting she tried to sneak back in. It looks like someone attacked her at that moment, as evidenced by footprints in the gravel. Katie put up a fight, but sadly, her attacker was too strong. The police think the killer then took her body to a desert landfill and tried to burn. The investigation focused on the party Katie attended earlier that night, which about 40 people went to. It's possible someone followed her home and attacked her. Could it have been her boyfriend, Joe? The police interviewed everyone at the party and discovered something important that Joe hadn't mentioned. Katie saw him kissing another girl, which led to a fight and her decision to leave alone, forgetting her purse. Katie was furious and wanted to escape the party as quickly as possible. However, when the police first questioned Joe, he didn't mention the argument they had. He also didn't tell Katie's parents, who were wondering why she left the party alone, about the fight. Later, the investigators questioned Joe again, telling him they knew about the argument because Katie saw him kissing another girl. Joe admitted it was true. He claimed that after Katie left, he followed her in his car, but only drove up to her house and didn't go inside. He thought she was asleep because her bedroom light was off, so he returned to the party. It turned out Joe wasn't at the party when Katie was attacked. None of the partygoers could confirm exactly when Joe got back. He might have had time to commit the crime, take Katie's body to the desert, and return to the party. When the investigators questioned the party attendees, they found another suspicious detail. After returning to the party, Joe started calling Katie's cell phone, which was in her purse. He found the phone when it started ringing and knew it belonged to Katie. Despite this, Joe continued calling her phone until morning. The investigators were puzzled by Joe's behavior and wondered if he was trying to create an alibi or feign concern for his girlfriend Katie. They wanted to question him further, but Joe refused to cooperate with the police. His absence from Katie's funeral only fueled their suspicion. The investigators needed to obtain his DNA sample and compare it to the DNA evidence found on Katie's body. The evidence included human skin cells discovered under her fingernails, which were identical in all 3 locations. However, getting Joe's DNA sample proved to be a challenge. He was out of town, and his parents had hired a lawyer who informed the police that Joe was refusing to provide a DNA sample. Looking at Joe's suspicious behavior, everyone was convinced he was hiding something and possibly involved in Katie's death. The police needed a legitimate way to obtain his DNA to confirm their suspicions, but it took time. While they worked on that, they also explored other leads, investigating similar cases to see if Katie was the only victim. The DNA samples found on Katie's body didn't match anyone in the national database. So, the investigators went back to the party where it all started. They asked all the male attendees to provide a DNA sample, and everyone agreed since they had nothing to hide. However, none of their DNA samples matched the one found on Katie's body, which led the investigators back to Joe. He was the only one who refused to provide his DNA, but the police found another way to get it. They discovered that Joe and Katie had been intimate in her bedroom before the party. The police took the bedsheet from Katie's room, hoping to find Joe's DNA, and they were successful. However, the male DNA found on the bedsheet didn't match the one found on Katie's body, clearing Joe of any involvement in her death. This raised another question. Why had Joe refused to cooperate with the police if he wasn't involved in Katie's death? After receiving the test results from the police, Joe's lawyer informed him that he was no longer a suspect. With this new information, Joe decided to cooperate with the police and provide a DNA sample. The subsequent test confirmed the initial finding: Joe was not involved in Katie's murder. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Katie had been intimate before the party, and he worried that his DNA would be found on her body. Despite being cleared, the circumstances surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Katie's death remained unclear to both the police and Katie's family. With Joe no longer a suspect, the investigation turned its focus to other leads. Several partygoers reported that Katie wore rings, including one given to her by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed the killer must have removed them. Although they searched local pawn shops, Katie's jewelry was never found. Another potential clue was a set of tire tracks near where Katie's body was discovered. Forensic experts were able to identify the brand and model of the tires. The manufacturer informed the police that these tires were commonly used on pickup trucks. The case of Katie's murder reached a dead end until a similar crime occurred in Green Bay, Wisconsin, about a year later. A girl was attacked and set on fire, but miraculously, she survived by pretending to be dead until her attackers left. She sought help at a nearby house and described her assailants to the police as two Hispanic males. The police published sketches of the suspects, which led a farmer to identify them as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Las Cruces, where Katie was killed, and often visited them. They were arrested, and the police believed they had finally caught Katie's killer. However, DNA analysis proved otherwise. The DNA samples from the Wisconsin suspects did not match the DNA evidence found on Katie's body, leaving the case still unsolved. Two men, Neo and Morales, were later found guilty of assaulting a girl in Green Bay, but they were not involved in Katie's case. Neo received a 70-year prison sentence, while Morales got 50 years. This led to another dead end in the investigation. The police were left with only two pieces of evidence: tire tracks from the crime scene and DNA samples from the perpetrator. On December 18, 2006, a significant breakthrough occurred in the investigation when a lab discovered a DNA sample matching the one found on Katie's body. The DNA belonged to 26-year-old Gabriel Avila, a married father with a lengthy criminal record. Notably, Avila had been released from prison shortly before Katie's murder, and he had no prior connection to her. Just 3 months after Katie's brutal murder, Avila was arrested on November 13, 2003, for breaking into the apartment of two young women while wielding a knife. They managed to protect themselves by locking themselves in the bathroom and calling 911. Avila was subsequently convicted of aggravated burglary with intent to commit aggravated assault in March 2004. However, Avila was released on bond and promptly became a fugitive. Unfortunately, the system's flaws delayed his connection to Katie's death by 3.5 years. Avila evaded authorities for nearly a year before being apprehended in November 2004, thanks to a tip. He could have been arrested as early as 3 months after Katie's attack, but the imperfections in the system allowed him to remain at large. Avila was sentenced to 9 years in prison, but it wasn't until 2 years into his sentence that a DNA sample was finally tested. The results showed a partial match with DNA evidence found at Katie's crime scene, prompting investigators to take swift action. They quickly located the truck Avila had used to dump Katie's body and found a ring belonging to Katie in the center console. The detectives investigating Katie's case visited Avila in prison after discovering Katie's ring in his truck. Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that he had been in the area that night to buy illegal substances while his wife was away. He claimed to have seen Katie and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later, Avila encountered Katie again in front of her house. He claimed to have stopped and offered to help her, saying she was unable to get into her house because she didn't have her purse. Katie had planned to enter her bedroom through the window, but Avila attacked her, undressed her, and committed the crime. Avila removed Katie's clothes and then, fearing she would identify him, decided to strangle her. During the struggle, he grabbed her throat and found himself unable to let go. After killing her, Avila placed her body in his pickup truck and drove to a desert landfill where he dumped her body. Avila attempted to destroy evidence by setting Katie's body on fire, but this failed. A DNA sample was later taken from Avila and matched with evidence found on Katie's body in 2003. At the time, however, it was illegal in most states, including New Mexico, to take DNA samples from those arrested. DNA was only entered into the system after a conviction and subsequent imprisonment. This led Katie's parents to campaign for a law that would require those arrested for violent crimes to submit a DNA sample, which would then be added to the national database. They fought to have this law, named after their daughter, passed in all 50 states. Katie's Law, which was passed in New Mexico in 2006 with near-unanimous support, allows for the collection of DNA samples from individuals arrested for certain crimes. Thanks to the persistent efforts of Katie's parents, the law was made federal in 2010 and has since been adopted by over 31 states. The trial of Gabriel Avila started in 2017. During the trial, Avila apologized to Katie's family and expressed remorse. However, his lawyer asked the judge to be lenient, stating that Avila had shown remorse. On the other hand, District Attorney Susana Martinez argued that Avila only confessed after being confronted with DNA evidence more than 3 years after the crime. At the sentencing, Katie's father, David, begged the judge not to show leniency. He passionately argued that since they would never get to see their daughter again, Avila shouldn't be allowed to experience freedom again. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and sentenced to 69 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2043 after serving 30 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Autumn Taggart. Autumn Taggart was a single mother living in Windsor, a city on the border between Michigan, USA, and Ontario, Canada. In 2018, Autumn and her 9-year-old son Gavin spent a Saturday with Gavin's father, Chris, from whom Autumn had amicably separated. They all went grocery shopping together, and later Chris dropped them off at their third-floor apartment. That evening, Chris left for his own home, and Gavin spent quality time with his mother, playing video games before bed. As he drifted off to sleep, he was awoken by a strange noise. Opening his eyes, he was startled to see an unknown man standing in his room. The man instructed Gavin to close his eyes and go back to sleep before disappearing into the hallway. Gavin's room was adjacent to his mother's, which was on the right-hand side of his room. Approximately a minute after the stranger left his room, Gavin heard his mother's scream. Overcome with fear, Gavin had never felt such terror before. The screaming eventually stopped, and an eerie silence fell over the apartment. Exhausted and shaken, Gavin eventually fell back asleep. The next morning, Gavin woke up and immediately went to his mother's room. Everything in the apartment was smashed and destroyed. Gavin found his mother lying on the bed. At first, he thought she was asleep, but when he saw the blood on her nose, he realized she was dead. This discovery shocked him. Gavin couldn't contain his emotions. He broke down in tears and decided to seek help. He entered his mother's room, took her phone, and messaged his father, Chris, via the Messenger app. Gavin sent a message saying that Autumn wouldn't wake up. Chris and his girlfriend immediately drove to Autumn and Gavin's home. Upon arrival, Chris got out of the car and saw his son standing behind a glass door on the third floor. Since Chris didn't have an electronic key to enter the building, Gavin went downstairs to let him in. Chris asked Gavin to stay with his girlfriend while he checked on Autumn. When Chris entered the apartment and then the bedroom, he was met with a devastating sight. Autumn was lying pale and still. Autumn's body showed signs of severe trauma, with bruises on her face and body and a bloody nose. He immediately called 911, and police and paramedics arrived at the scene. Unfortunately, the paramedics were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead. The police investigation began, and experts searched the apartment for evidence. A child specialist interviewed Gavin, who reported that a man had told him to go to sleep the night before. Gavin said he heard his mother screaming, but the scream stopped after a while. He described the man he saw in his room as a white male of average height with messy hair, who appeared disheveled, as if he had just gotten out of bed. Gavin estimated the man was slender, but not extremely thin. The autopsy revealed that Autumn's death was caused by strangulation, and forensic experts found evidence that she had been physically assaulted before her death. Additionally, the examination showed injuries in her genital area and the presence of male DNA on her body. Initially, the police considered the possibility that the killer was one of the building's tenants. However, Gavin reported that the man he saw on the night of the crime was not a familiar face. Furthermore, the investigation showed that the perpetrator not only needed an electronic key to enter the building, but also to enter Autumn's apartment. Yet, there were no signs of forced entry on the door to her apartment. The police initially considered two possibilities: that Autumn had let the perpetrator in herself, or that she had left the door unlocked. However, they soon discovered evidence that suggested the perpetrator had actually climbed to the third floor. The perpetrator first accessed the second-floor balcony and then climbed up to the third floor, where the door was open, allowing them to enter the apartment without difficulty. On the night of the crime, a witness reported seeing a new black SUV, possibly a Honda Pilot, in the parking lot next to the building. The SUV was there until around 6 a.m. Detectives suspected that the owner of the SUV might be connected to the victim's death. They believed that the perpetrator may have used the SUV as a stepping stone to climb into the building and then used the decorative protrusions on the building's corners as a makeshift ladder to climb from the second floor to the third floor. The crime occurred at night, which made it easier for investigators to analyze mobile phone activity in the area where Autumn lived. One of the active phone numbers belonged to Autumn's neighbor, Michelle, who lived in the same building. During the initial police interview, Michelle claimed she didn't know anything about the crime. However, phone records showed that she had been on the move around the city, making calls from different locations, and had turned off her phone around the time of the murder. Although the exact location of Michelle's phone couldn't be pinpointed due to some margin of error, it was clear that she was either in or near her apartment at the time of the crime. The detectives suspected that Michelle was hiding something and decided to question her again. During the second interview, Michelle continued to deny any knowledge of the crime. However, the police warned her that withholding information could make her an accomplice to the crime. Faced with this possibility, Michelle began to open up. She revealed that a man named Jay had contacted her boyfriend and her around 2 a.m. on the night of the crime. Jay wanted to purchase an illicit substance and also hire an escort. To begin, Jay, Michelle, and her boyfriend went to an ATM where Jay withdrew cash. Michelle and her boyfriend then provided Jay with a portion of the substance, which Michelle admitted they were selling themselves. Later, Jay asked to buy more of the substance. Michelle instructed Jay to drive to the parking lot near her building, where she and her boyfriend planned to rob him. Upon arrival, the three of them used the substance together. Afterwards, Michelle and her boyfriend decided to flee. Before escaping, Michelle hid a bag of the banned substance in her genital area. This detail will become important later. Michelle reported that she and her boyfriend fled the scene, taking both the banned substance and a portion of Jay's money with them. They ran to the building's entrance and then proceeded to her apartment, where they locked themselves in, remained quiet, and kept the lights off. Jay was unable to enter the building because he didn't have an electronic key. From Michelle's apartment window, they observed shoe marks on the roof of Jay's car. The man left the scene around 6 a.m. Investigators believe that Jay attempted to enter the building to find the individuals who had stolen from him. However, since Jay didn't know Michelle's address, it's likely that he mistakenly entered Autumn's apartment instead. The police now had the suspect's phone number and photo, which were obtained from security cameras at the bank where he withdrew cash to purchase the banned substance, as well as from an ATM camera. After investigating the phone number, authorities discovered that the individual's name was not Jay, but rather Jitesh Bhogal, a 27-year-old Canadian citizen who worked as a car development engineer in Warren, Michigan. He owned a black Honda Pilot SUV and frequently visited Canada, crossing the border via bridge or tunnel to get to Windsor. Authorities tracked his movements and found that he had left Canada on the morning of June 10th, the day Autumn died, and had not returned to the country since. When the police released information about the black SUV seen at the victim's house, Jitesh sold his car, which raised suspicions. The Canadian police contacted their American counterparts and learned that Jitesh was planning to move from Michigan to Washington State, where his parents lived in Kent. This decision to give up his job and move back to his parents' house, get rid of his car, and stop visiting Canada was highly suspicious. However, the police needed concrete evidence to arrest and extradite him to Canada. The Windsor police requested assistance from the U.S. National Security Agency to aid in the investigation and track the suspect's movements. To confirm that the male DNA found on Autumn's body belonged to Jitesh, they needed to obtain a sample of his DNA for comparison. U.S. agents monitored Jitesh's activities, aware that he was planning to move to Washington state and potentially flee to a third country. Jitesh attempted to alter his appearance by shaving off his beard and wearing blue contact lenses. But Jitesh was not cautious enough. During a visit to a bar in Warren, he left behind a glass after finishing his drink. Agents seized the glass, which provided them with a DNA sample. Although the comparison process took time, the result was not unexpected. The DNA sample from the glass matched the male DNA found on Autumn's body, confirming that it belonged to Jitesh Bogle. On August 17, 2018, more than 2 months after Autumn's death, Jitesh was arrested at his parents' home in Kent, Washington. The Canadian police charged him with the murder of Autumn Taggart. Due to restrictions in the country, the trial was postponed for a significant period of time and eventually began in November 2021. To maintain social distancing, the trial was held in 3 separate courtrooms. The main courtroom contained the judge, prosecutor, jury, and the defendant, along with his defense team. The 3 other courtrooms had large screens broadcasting the trial so that Autumn's relatives and others could watch. Jitesh Bogle entered a not guilty plea for the crime of taking Autumn's life, saying it was an accident. He explained that some dealers had stolen money and an illegal substance from him, running out of his car after committing the crime. This upset him, so he got out of the vehicle to try to find them. Due to the large amount of alcohol and substances he had consumed, he did not remember much of what happened that night. Jitesh said he remembered climbing onto the balcony before entering the apartment where Autumn lived. When he entered her apartment, he saw her asleep in her bed, but he mistakenly thought she was Michelle, the person who had robbed him. When Autumn woke up and started screaming, Jitesh told her to be quiet, but she didn't stop. In an attempt to quiet her, Jitesh covered her mouth, which ultimately caused her to suffocate. Jitesh said that when the screaming stopped, he realized what had happened and tried to revive Autumn by performing CPR, but unfortunately, it didn't work. Jitesh did not recall how Autumn's genital injuries occurred or how he left her apartment. His lawyers asked the prosecution to drop the first-degree murder charges, arguing that the crime was not premeditated. They believed that Jitesh was not in control of his actions due to the large amount of substances he had consumed. The fact that he placed his hand over her mouth was more consistent with an attempt to silence her than with an intent to kill. Bogle's defense team argued that he was not responsible for the death of Autumn Taggart because he was intoxicated and did not have the capacity to form intent or understand the consequences of his actions. They stated that his behavior was the result of intoxication and that he did not intentionally cause the death. The defense team questioned the reliability of the DNA evidence, suggesting that it could have been contaminated by John Lorda, a forensic expert who worked on the case. They argued that Lorda's actions, including rotating the body on the bed sheet, could have transferred DNA or fluids from the body to the sheet or vice versa, resulting in cross-contamination. Lort testified during cross-examination that he followed proper procedures to prevent cross-contamination of evidence. He changed gloves between handling each piece of evidence and taking photographs. Lort's examination of evidence in Taggart's room included a search for fluids such as urine, saliva, and semen, as these are common indicators of sexual assault in cases involving a deceased female victim. The prosecutor disagreed with the defendant's version of events. The prosecutor pointed out that the defendant had previously searched for substances in the same area of Autumn's body where Michelle had hidden them, which suggested that the defendant was aware of the substances and had intentionally committed sexual assault. The prosecutor stated that the defendant's actions were disgusting and constituted sexual assault. Jitesh Bogle, disagreed with the prosecutor's assessment. When asked why he didn't call for emergency services when Autumn stopped breathing, Bogle explained that he was afraid of being arrested because he didn't think anyone would believe him. Bogle admitted that he didn't remember much of what happened in Autumn's room, but he did recall performing CPR on her after she stopped screaming. Gavin, Autumn's 13-year-old son, also took the stand during the trial. To make the experience less intimidating, he testified from a separate room in the courthouse, accompanied by a support worker. From this room, he shared his account of the events that occurred that night. On December 1, 2021, a 12-person jury delivered a guilty verdict to Jitesh Bogle for first-degree murder. The jury did not find sufficient evidence to prove that Bogle had intercourse with the victim, Autumn. Autumn's father, John Tager, expressed relief and satisfaction with the verdict, stating that it was the right outcome for Autumn and her son, and that the family had finally received justice. On January 5, 2022, the court sentenced Jitesh Bogle to life imprisonment with a minimum of 25 years to be served before he can apply for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Danielle Jennings. Danielle Jennings was born on September 16, 1978, in Columbia, South Carolina, USA. She spent her childhood in Stockton, Georgia, with her mother and stepfather. Despite her cheerful and outgoing personality, Danielle faced a challenging situation when she became pregnant at the age of 16. However, she was determined to be a good mother and had no doubts about having her child. After the breakup with Carl, the father of her child, Danielle gave birth to her son, Tristan, in 1996. At just 17 years old, she became a single mother. Despite the challenges, Danielle was determined to provide the best life for herself and her son. She eventually met Luis, a man who would become a father figure to Tristan. Danielle and Luis had known each other since they were teenagers and had been friends in the past. When they started dating, Danielle was happy to have found someone who could support her and her son. Luis took care of Danielle and Tristan, and she felt like her life was finally falling into place. They moved in together, and Danielle found a job at a landscaping company. She was proud of herself for taking this step and was glad to have found a sense of stability and security. In December 1998, Luis proposed to Danielle, and she happily accepted. At the time, Danielle's life was on the upswing. She had a wonderful son, was engaged to the man she loved, and had promising career prospects. However, her life was about to take a devastating turn. On March 15, 1999, Luis came home from work to find Danielle lifeless on their bed. Their son, Tristan, was at daycare that day. Luis immediately knew something was wrong based on the color of Danielle's skin. He called 911, and police arrived at their apartment in Norcross, Georgia. The initial information was that a woman had died and her fiancé had made the 911 call. This raised suspicions among investigators, as it is not uncommon for the partner to be involved in the death of their loved one. Luis reported the crime to the police at the apartment entrance, stating that the victim was 20-year-old Danielle Jennings. According to Luis, he found Danielle's body when he returned from work. She was lying face down on the bed, and when he turned her over, he discovered that she was dead. Luis immediately called 911. The police took Luis to the station for questioning, and investigators examined the crime scene. Danielle was lying on her back on the bed, fully dressed, with a ligature around her neck. The ligature was a stocking tied very tightly, indicating that the perpetrator left her no chance of survival. The stocking was tied at the back of Danielle's neck, suggesting that the perpetrator was behind her when she was strangled. The bed was disheveled, and one of the dresser drawers was open, possibly indicating that the perpetrator took the stocking from her drawer. Additionally, Danielle's purse had been rummaged through, with its contents dumped out. The police considered the possibility that the crime was a robbery that escalated into murder, but noted that valuable items such as cameras and jewelry remained untouched. The investigators considered the possibility that the perpetrator's goal was to steal from the apartment, but after encountering Danielle, decided to kill her to eliminate her as a witness. They also explored the possibility that the crime scene was staged, as the front door showed no signs of forced entry. After searching the surrounding area, they found no evidence. The sliding glass door leading to the backyard was locked and showed no signs of forced entry. Based on their findings, the investigators concluded that Danielle must have let the perpetrator involuntarily, or that the perpetrator had a key to the apartment. This led them to focus on Luis, Danielle's fiancé, as the main suspect during their questioning. Luis was very emotional about the situation, as romantic relationships can sometimes lead to intense anger and sad consequences. The interrogation began with questions about his whereabouts on the day of his fiancé's death. According to Luis, he spent the entire day at work, and the last time he saw Danielle was Danielle was when he left for work in the morning. They both left the apartment at 6:45 a.m., but Danielle returned to get something. Luis claimed that Danielle was worried about an important meeting with management that day and seemed a little distracted. He also mentioned that Danielle called him at 11:30 a.m. to ask if he wanted to go to lunch with her, but he refused because he had a lot of work to do. Luis tried to contact Danielle later that day, but she wasn't answering. He called her colleagues and learned that she had gone out for lunch but never returned. When he tried to call their home phone, Danielle didn't answer. This led him to leave work and check on her. When he arrived at their apartment, he noticed that the front door was unlocked, and he found a jar that made him nervous. During the investigation, Luis stated that they had a good relationship and were deeply in love. Luis expressed that he was depressed and felt that the police were wasting their time by interrogating him, as he believed the real culprit was still at large. Detectives interviewed Danielle's friends and family, who all confirmed that Luis could not harm Danielle, as they were planning a wedding and were in love. Luis's co-workers also confirmed that he was at work all day, which ruled out any possibility of his involvement in the crime. Luis mentioned that Danielle had been receiving excessive attention from her co-worker, Jeff, who made her uncomfortable. Investigators went to Danielle's workplace and spoke to her boss, who confirmed that Danielle had complained about Jeff's behavior. Jeff's behavior was making Danielle uncomfortable. He was touching her and interfering with her work. Danielle had made it clear that she was in a committed relationship with Luis. Despite this, Jeff continued to make Danielle feel uncomfortable. The situation was also complicated by the fact that Jeff was 40 years old, while Danielle was just 20. Danielle's co-workers reported that she left the office for lunch, but never returned, providing investigators with a timeline for when the attack occurred. This raised suspicions about Jeff, who was absent from the office during the same time frame. The investigation explored the possibility that Jeff may have attacked Danielle after she opened the front door to her home. This could explain why there were no signs of forced entry. Jeff was brought in for questioning to discuss his relationship with Danielle. During the questioning, Jeff acknowledged inviting Danielle to lunch, but denied any involvement in Danielle's death. He did admit to liking Danielle, but stated that he didn't engage in any inappropriate behavior that would justify her complaint against him. Jeff claimed that he couldn't have attacked Danielle because he had an alibi. According to Jeff, he was with another colleague all day, working on various issues and driving around the city together. This meant that it was impossible for him to have committed the crime. Jeff identified a co-worker who he claimed was with him at the time of the crime. Investigators met with this co-worker, who confirmed Jeff's alibi, thus ruling out Jeff from suspect. The autopsy report provided some insight into the circumstances of Danielle's death. The cause of death was asphyxia, indicating that Danielle was attacked by surprise. Investigators concluded that the perpetrator approached her from behind and tightened the stocking until she lost consciousness. The perpetrator then tied the stocking in a knot to prevent Danielle from regaining consciousness. The lack of defensive injuries on her body suggested that Danielle did not resist the attack. In fact, the only injury on her body was the ligature mark on her neck, indicating that she may not have even seen the face of her attacker. The police investigation at the crime scene did not yield any evidence that could help identify the perpetrator. Despite a thorough search, no shoe prints, DNA, fingerprints, or hair were found. As a result, there was no evidence to send to the laboratory for analysis. Without any new leads, the police returned to their initial theory that the crime was a robbery gone wrong. The police asked Luis to re-examine the apartment with them to see if he could notice anything unusual. After a thorough examination, Luis reported that nothing seemed to be missing from the apartment and all items were in their usual places. However, a few days later, Luis contacted the police to report that he could not find Danielle's wedding ring. Luis also pointed out another unusual detail to the investigators. The stocking used to strangle Danielle did not belong to her. According to Luis, Danielle did not wear stockings, which suggested that the perpetrator had brought the stocking with them. One of her friends mentioned her ex-boyfriend Eddie, whom she started dating while pregnant. Eddie was known for his violent behavior, and as the relationship progressed, he became increasingly controlling and domineering. He eventually forbade her to see her friends and family. The relationship with Eddie continued to deteriorate after Danielle gave birth to her son. Things took a turn for the worse when Eddie started using illegal substances, and Danielle decided to end the relationship. Danielle attempted to start anew after leaving Eddie, but he refused to accept the end of their relationship. His behavior became increasingly unpredictable, prompting Danielle to obtain a restraining order against him. However, Eddie repeatedly disregarded the order. Eddie's actions escalated, with him frequently calling Danielle, parking near her home, and even appearing at her workplace. Danielle's family reported that Eddie had made numerous calls to her in the months leading up to her death, demanding that she meet with him, but she consistently hung up on him. Detectives identified Eddie as a prime suspect and brought him in for questioning. He was hostile and resistant to cooperating with the police. When discussing Danielle, his demeanor became visibly agitated. During the interrogation, Eddie's account of his relationship with Danielle contradicted the statements made by her family members. He claimed to have never been violent towards her and denied any involvement in her death, stating that he had not spoken to her in over a year. The investigators suspected that Eddie was lying to them. To verify his alibi, they checked Danielle's phone call history and discovered that Eddie had been in contact with her in the months leading up to her death. The police needed to confirm Eddie's whereabouts at the time of the attack. Eddie claimed to have been working out of state as a tow truck driver at the time of Danielle's death. He stated that he was miles away from the Ashley Lakes apartments where Danielle lived. His employer corroborated Eddie's story, providing receipts from a motel and gas stations that suggested Eddie was indeed out of state. However, 3 days after Danielle's death, the police received a new lead that changed the direction of the investigation. During an interview with residents of Ashley Lakes apartments, a woman shared a disturbing incident that had occurred a week before Danielle's death. She reported that she had been awoken by a knock on her door, but when she looked through the peephole, no one was there. She returned to bed, but a minute later, she heard her front door slam shut. She reported an incident where a maintenance man entered her apartment without permission. She stated that he was looking at her rather than performing his job, which made her feel uncomfortable. This incident led to an investigation, and the woman provided a description of the man to the police. Further investigation revealed that another woman had reported a similar incident, where a man entered her apartment claiming to need to change light bulbs, despite her apartment not needing any new bulbs. The man made a statement suggesting that he might be in the wrong apartment and then left. The management of Ashley Lakes Apartments provided investigators with a list of maintenance specialists working at the complex, and only one matched the description given by the two women. This individual was identified as Calvin Oliver, a 42-year-old maintenance worker who started working at the complex in September 1998. When shown his photo, both women identified Oliver as the man who entered their apartments without permission. The investigation also revealed that Oliver had been working at the complex when a string of incidents involving stolen items occurred, including missing cash, checks, jewelry, and computers. As the investigation continued, detectives searched for potential connections between Calvin Oliver and Danielle Jennings. They discovered that Oliver had performed work in Jennings' apartment just a couple of weeks before her death. This revelation made Oliver a key person of interest in the investigation. Oliver likely knew that Danielle and her fiancé Luis would be at work during the day, allowing him to enter their apartment without raising suspicion using his master key. It's possible that Danielle returned home for lunch while Oliver was already inside. Calvin Oliver was brought in for questioning by investigators. Initially, they asked him about the thefts that some Ashley Lakes Apartments residents had reported. He denied any involvement. When questioned about Danielle Jennings, Oliver claimed he had heard about what happened to her but didn't know her personally. He admitted to doing work in her apartment, but the police lacked concrete evidence linking him to the crime. Just before releasing Oliver from the police station, investigators decided to run a database check on him. The results were shocking. Oliver had an outstanding warrant in another jurisdiction for failing to appear on a burglary charge related to the theft of personal checks. Oliver had a significant criminal history with convictions dating back to 1974, including residential burglaries, armed robbery, and sexual assault. He spent most of his life in prison, which raises the question of how he was able to get a job at Ashley Lakes Apartments. This is relevant because if Oliver was in Danielle's apartment when she came in, he had a motive to hurt her to avoid going back to prison. The police detained Oliver due to an active warrant for his arrest, which gave them time to investigate his involvement in Danielle's death. As part of their investigation into the thefts at Ashley Lakes Apartments, the police obtained a search warrant for Oliver's apartment. There, they found stolen belongings from other residents, as well as Danielle's wedding ring, which linked Oliver to her death. 9 days after Danielle's death, Calvin Oliver was charged with first-degree felony and burglary. After his false statement was exposed, Oliver refused to answer any more questions and chose to remain silent. During the trial, the prosecution presented a different scenario. Oliver killed Danielle after she caught him stealing at her apartment on March 14th, as she unexpectedly returned home from work. The trial lasted 5 days, and the jury delivered a guilty verdict on October 13, 2000. The court sentenced Oliver to life in prison for the murder of Danielle Jennings and an additional 20 years for stealing her wedding ring. As a result, Danielle's mother and stepfather, Sherry and Philip Jennings, gained custody of her son, Tristan. Ashley Lakes Apartments was aware of Oliver's troubled past, but failed to conduct a background check on him. This lack of oversight allowed Oliver, who had spent most of his life in prison, to reside in the same apartment complex as Danielle. Danielle's family sued Ashley Lakes Apartments after a series of thefts, and the murder went unreported by management. They claimed negligent hiring, inadequate security, and death. The jury returned a verdict of over $13 million, plus $2.5 million in punitive damages initially, later reduced to $250,000. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Loeb. On August 19, 2014, at 5 p.m., the Portland Emergency Services received a distress call from a man reporting a woman stabbed in the chest at the Timber Creek Apartments. The victim, who was still alive but struggling to breathe, needed immediate medical attention. The eyewitness requested an ambulance be sent to the scene as soon as possible. When paramedics arrived, they found the victim. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. Before passing away, she shared crucial information. The man who made the 911 call explained that he and his wife were walking down the stairs towards the parking lot when they heard a scream. He looked to his right and saw a woman running towards them, crying out, "He stabbed me! He stabbed me!" The victim told them that she didn't know her attacker, but described him as wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of the Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as 29-year-old Nicole Laub, a leasing consultant who had been working at the complex for a few weeks. On August 19th, Nicole was driving a golf cart to deliver lease renewal letters to residents, along with a balloon and a popcorn package. She marked each apartment on a map as she made the deliveries. The investigation revealed that the attack likely occurred in a specific stairwell at Timber Creek, known as Breezeway. This conclusion was based on Nicole's notations and the map she had marked. It is believed that the attacker was waiting for her under the stairs, as several indicators pointed to this location, including a trail of blood drops and scattered leaflets at the foot of the stairs. During the investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young male wearing a black hoodie and cam pants in the area around the time of the attack. By combining the reports and timelines of each sighting, detectives were able to piece together the path the suspect took into and out of Timber Creek. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, which runs through the Timber Creek apartment complex. They found several items during their search and sent them to a laboratory to see if they were relevant to the case. The police contacted Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, to inform him of the incident. Chris and Nicole had a blended family, including 2 daughters from his previous relationships and a son together. Nicole was a strong and resilient person who had overcome cancer as a teenager. She developed a passion for fitness and bodybuilding and competed in several events. Her dream was to become a coach and help others achieve their fitness goals. The attack on Nicole was not a robbery, and Tinoco did not attempt to remove any of her clothing. This suggests that the motive behind the attack may have been personal. As a result, detectives began to focus their attention on her husband, Chris. Nicole was a beautiful woman, a loving wife, an amazing mother, and a devoted friend. She was unafraid to share her faith and opinions with others, and her goal was to make the world a better place. Her legacy lives on, and it's clear that she achieved her goal. She touched the lives of everyone in the room in ways that will have a lasting impact. The police interviewed residents of the Timber Creek Apartments and found 2 witnesses who saw a man in a black hoodie and cam pants matching the suspect's description running across the road during the time of the attack. The witnesses saw the man running towards the houses across the street from the Timber Creek Apartments, not looking around, and with a hood over his head. Using the witnesses' descriptions, detectives created a sketch of the suspect and quickly distributed it throughout the city. A sketch of the suspect was shown on TV. Detectives also worked with informants, gathering several potential leads, including one from a man whose son knew someone named Taylor. According to the man who reported Taylor, he had been threatening people with a knife in recent weeks. The police located Taylor and brought him in for questioning. During the questioning, investigators found his statements unusual and suspected he might be suffering from a mental illness. When asked about Nicole Laub, he openly admitted to taking her life. However, Taylor's confession was inconsistent, repeating information from the news and inventing unrelated details. As a result, police excluded him from their list of suspects. Another potential lead emerged involving a man named Nick, who had a history of crime. Nick had some physical characteristics similar to the suspect in the sketch, but his past behavior didn't suggest he was capable of a crime like the one committed against Nicole. Despite having a history of run-ins with the law, Nick had never been known to physically harm anyone. When police brought Nick in for questioning, he denied any involvement in the crime and requested a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home, where they found a black hoodie and camouflage pants. However, the hoodie didn't match the witness's description because it had a prominent white logo on the front. The police sent the clothes to a lab for further analysis, but experts found no evidence linking them to the crime. The police obtained Nick's mobile phone records, which provided conclusive evidence that he was not at the crime scene when Nicole was attacked. This eliminated Nick as a suspect, leaving the investigation at a dead end. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received a call came from Eugene, the second largest city in Oregon. On the night of the 13th, Heather Miller, a 39-year-old woman, was attacked as she was leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium after watching a game. Tinoco, identified as Jamie Tinoco, was publicly named by the police, who released his photo in the hopes that other victims would come forward. Detectives investigating the death of Nicole Lobb noticed a resemblance between Tinoco's photo and their suspect sketch. Further investigation revealed that Tinoco lived with his parents in an apartment directly across from the Timber Creek apartment complex where Lobb had died. This geographical proximity strengthened the suspicion that Tinoco might be responsible for her death. Detectives questioned Tinoco about his potential involvement in Lobb's death, hoping he would confess, just as he had done in a separate case involving Heather Miller. However, Tinoco denied any involvement in Lobb's death and refused to cooperate. As a result, the police had to gather evidence to link Tinoco to the crime. With his parents' apartment located directly across from the Timber Creek complex, the police obtained a search warrant. During the search, they found a black hoodie and cam pants in Tinoco's room, which they sent to the lab for analysis. The lab report results with no DNA match found. While there's no concrete evidence linking Tinoco to Nicole's death, he's clearly responsible for attacking Heather Miller and showed no remorse, even taking pride in his actions during his trial. In a new interrogation, investigators used Tinoco's ego to their advantage, suggesting that if he confessed to Nicole Lobb's murder, he would gain respect from other inmates in prison. The detective implied that owning up to the crime would make him appear more formidable, rather than just a coward who attacked a woman from behind. After a brief silence, Tinoco began to open up about Nicole. He claimed that he didn't intend to kill her, but rather wanted to experience the feeling of stabbing someone. According to Tinoco, his goal was to hurt Nicole, not take her life. He described how he had seen Nicole parking a golf cart and carrying a balloon in a small package to an apartment on the second floor of Timber Creek, which is located near his apartment. Nicole was attacked when she went upstairs and then came back down. Tinoco hid behind a golf cart, then ran to the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she descended. He chose Nicole because she seemed like an easy target. When questioned about his intentions, he admitted that he had considered forcing Nicole into a sexual act, just as he had done with Heather Miller. However, he claimed that he didn't follow through with this plan because Nicole screamed loudly after being stabbed, prompting him to flee the scene. During a reenactment of the crime, Tinoco demonstrated how he escaped from the scene. Chris Lobb, Nicole's husband, was shocked to learn that the person responsible for his wife's death was only 17 years old. As a father of a 13-year-old daughter, Lobb found it incomprehensible that someone just 4 years older than his daughter could commit such a heinous crime. The trial started in 2015. Tinoco confessed to the crime during the interrogation, but he claimed he was innocent in court. His lawyer argued that there was no DNA evidence linking Tinoco to the crime scene. The lawyer asked for mercy for Tinoco, who was 17 years old and severely mentally ill, and hoped that treatment could help him change his behavior. The defense presented only one witness, a psychologist who evaluated Tinoco and found that he exhibited symptoms of schizophrenia. However, another psychologist from the Oregon State Hospital disagreed, saying that Tinoco had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. The jury was convinced of Tinoco's guilt after watching a video of his confession and an experiment where he recreated his actions at the time of the crime. Jamie Tinoco provided details during a reenactment of Nicole Laub's crime that only the perpetrator would know. This led to a guilty verdict on all counts in 2017. The jury was tasked with deciding Tinoco's sentence, choosing between life without parole or life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. However, they found insufficient mitigating circumstances to warrant the option of parole, resulting in a sentence of life without parole. Before the official sentencing, Circuit Judge Kirsten Thompson allowed Tinoco to speak. With his attorneys by his side, Tinoco apologized and asked for forgiveness. Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, recalled that Tinoco's family approached them after the sentencing to offer condolences and apologize. However, in 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Tinoco's conviction, citing changes in juvenile laws. At the time of the crime, Tinoco was automatically referred to adult court due to the nature of the offense. New reforms now allow for offenders between 15 and 17 years old to be tried in juvenile court, rather than being automatically referred to adult court. A new law requires prosecutors to request a hearing to decide if a juvenile's serious crime case should be moved to adult court. This change affects the overturned conviction of Tinoco in the Nicole Laub case. Although Tinoco remains in prison, his defense may try to reduce his sentence if he's retried and reconvicted. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Lynn Plass was born on December 11, 1990, in Choppy, Massachusetts, where she grew up with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Her mother, Michelle Myers, described Amanda as a free-spirited individual who often seemed out of place in the present time. In 2011, Amanda was working as a waitress at a local restaurant in Choppy and was in a relationship with a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. Tragedy struck on August 26, 2011. Seth called 911 and reported that he had found Amanda lying unresponsive in the kitchen of her apartment. When police and paramedics arrived, they found that Amanda was already deceased from multiple stab wounds to her chest, throat, and abdomen. The scene was immediately cordoned off and investigations were initiated. Seth was found sitting on the porch, visibly distressed and emotional. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment for evidence, but the perpetrator had managed to escape the scene. The investigation was ongoing, with the goal of identifying the person responsible for Amanda's murder and bringing them to justice. Detectives began their investigation at the crime scene, where they found a significant amount of blood splatter in the kitchen, indicating that this was where the attack occurred. The evidence suggested that a knife was the likely murder weapon, and it was taken by the perpetrator. Further analysis revealed visible shoe prints from Nike sneakers on the floor and broken window glass, bearing a palm print in one of the rooms. Given the type and number of wounds on Amanda's body, detectives suspected that the perpetrator was someone Amanda knew, and the motive was likely a personal vendetta. As a result, they brought Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green, in for questioning at the police station. When Seth arrived at the police station, he appeared visibly shaken, overcome with emotion over the loss of his girlfriend. The investigators were interested in determining his emotional response. During the interrogation, Seth explained that he had spent the entire day at work and had planned to give Amanda a ride to her workplace, but was unable to do so due to his own work schedule. Seth had a limited relationship with Amanda, but he loved her and had no motive to harm her. As a carpenter, Seth used various tools at work, including a knife on his tool belt. However, he consistently left his tools at work after his shift, and this day was no exception. After finishing his work, Seth changed his clothes, left his tools behind, and went to meet Amanda. He understood why he was the main suspect, but he denied any involvement in her death. The police investigation confirmed Seth's alibi, and he passed a polygraph test. Additionally, the boots he was wearing when the police arrived didn't match the Nike sneakers found at the crime scene, further ruling out his involvement. Amanda's tragic death led to a complex investigation. Initially, the police explored the possibility that her ex-boyfriend was involved, but further inquiry ruled him out as a suspect. He provided a DNA sample and fingerprints, which did not match the evidence found at the crime scene. Moreover, he had a solid alibi, eliminating him from the list of potential perpetrators. The family's pain deepened when they found out that some police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body while the state police were on their way to the crime scene. These officers shared the disturbing images with other officers and civilians, breaking the family's trust with the authorities and adding to their emotional pain. The case remained stagnant for approximately 2 years until investigators decided to review the evidence again. During this review, a crucial clue was discovered on a dry erase board in Amanda's bedroom. The message, "Dennis was here 8/11, had gone unnoticed until then. Considering the date, this message became significant. It was just 15 days before Amanda's body was discovered in her apartment. The revelation sparked questions. Who was Dennis, and was he connected to Amanda's death? The police had not come across this name throughout the entire investigation. Detectives analyzed Amanda's phone records and social media posts to see if she had any connections to someone named Dennis. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported to the police that her apartment had been broken into several times when she was not home. Amanda suspected a young man whose name started with the letter D. She knew this man and wanted to resolve the issue peacefully, so she decided to talk to him first. During their meeting, Amanda tried to discuss the break-ins, but the man denied any involvement. When Amanda mentioned that a neighbor had seen him in her apartment, she politely asked him to return her stolen belongings. However, the man left. The investigation then focused on identifying the man named Dennis, who was suspected of being involved in Amanda's death. The police found a man named Dennis Rosa Roman living 3 blocks from the scene of the crime. A background check revealed that Dennis had a history of breaking and entering. Although there was no palm print to match the one found at Amanda's home, the police still wanted to question Dennis. They located him in Westfield, Massachusetts, and invited him to the station for an informal conversation. However, Dennis declined the invitation. But in November 2013, Dennis voluntarily visited the police station. The police questioned Dennis about his relationship with Amanda, and he acknowledged knowing her from Chappie, but claimed he hadn't seen her in a couple of years, which was true since Amanda had been deceased for a couple of years. When asked if he had ever visited Amanda's apartment, Dennis denied ever being there and stated that he didn't know her well. He admitted to occasionally selling weed to Amanda, which was how they occasionally interacted. During the interrogation, Dennis agreed to provide a DNA swab and revealed the size of his shoes, which matched the one found at the crime scene. However, the police noted that Dennis's Nike Air Max shoes had a different tread pattern than the ones that left bloody tracks at the crime scene. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions, promising to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Initially, the police didn't have sufficient grounds to arrest Dennison, so he was released. This decision was made despite concerns that he might flee and hinder the investigation. Further investigation revealed that Amanda and Dennis had made several phone calls to each other on July 28, 2011. The phone records showed that Amanda initiated 4 calls, while Dennis initiated 5 calls. When Dennis returned to the police station a few days later, his story changed. He now claimed that he had communicated with Amanda about break-ins at her apartment when she wasn't home. Amanda didn't report the incidents because nothing of value was stolen. The investigators found this story unconvincing, particularly since they had heard about the alleged break-ins multiple times before. Their suspicions grew, and they strongly suspected that Dennis was actually the person responsible for breaking into Amanda's apartment. As Rosa Roman continued to alter his initial statement, the investigators became more confident that he was hiding something crucial to the case. The priority shifted to uncovering the truth about his involvement in Amanda's death and determining what secrets he was trying to conceal. When investigators showed Dennis a photo of a dry erase board with the message, "Dennis was here," on August 11, 2011, he initially admitted to writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never entered Amanda's apartment. This admission was significant, as it directly implicated him in the crime. Furthermore, DNA results confirmed that Dennis had given false testimony, as his DNA matched the DNA found under Amanda's fingernails, and his palm print was found on a glass at the crime scene. After realizing that the police had gathered sufficient evidence for his arrest, Dennis changed his story for the third time. He now claimed that he had been present at the crime scene and had attempted to save Amanda from the attacker. However, he refused to name the alleged attacker, citing concerns for his and his family's safety. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the person he claimed was responsible for Amanda's death. Dennis described the alleged attacker as a tall, white, light-skinned individual with blue eyes, weighing between 170 and 200 pounds. He also claimed that the person was wearing old pants, dirty boots, and a t-shirt with the phrase, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?" Despite this new information, detectives did not believe Dennis's story, as all the evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator of the crime. As a result, Dennis was arrested and charged with Amanda's murder. The trial took place almost 3 years after Amanda's death and centered around the debate over whether Dennis was responsible for her murder. His lawyers presented the argument that although Dennis was at the crime scene, he did not commit the murder. Instead, they accused the police of botching the investigation and framing Dennis after their efforts to find the perpetrator failed. Dennis claimed that his involvement in Amanda's death was involuntary. He stated that his dealer forced him to collect a debt at her apartment. Dennis allegedly tried to help Amanda, but couldn't stop the dealer. He cited his DNA under her nails as evidence, saying she grabbed his hand during the incident. In contrast, the prosecutors had a different explanation for the events leading to Amanda's death. They believed that Dennis was breaking into Amanda's apartment while she was not home and that she had caught him. During one of these break-ins, Dennis allegedly left an inscription with his name on a board. Amanda assumed that Dennis was the trespasser who had stolen from her, and that is why she called him and asked him to return the stolen items. This explained the multiple phone calls between Amanda and Dennis on the day she died. Dennis, the killer of Amanda, mistakenly believed Amanda was already at work, re-entered her apartment, and ultimately took her life in a fit of anger during a dispute. A jury convicted Dennis of the crime after 8 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation. Dennis received a life sentence in prison with no possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christina Ann and Thompson Harris. Christina Ann Thompson, 30, and Jason Thomas Harris, 40, had been married since 2003 after dating for about 5 years. They had their first child in 2009, and their lives changed significantly. Despite the challenges of everyday life, they seemed happy with their new life as parents. Christina took care of their child and the household, while Jason worked at a plastics factory. As their child grew up, Christina had the opportunity to contribute to the family budget by getting a job. However, in May 2014, she had to take maternity leave as she was expecting her second child. On September 29, 2014, Jason left for work and exchanged a few words with Christina, who was not feeling well due to a cold. Despite her poor health, she assured Jason that she was okay. A few hours later, Jason called his wife to check on her, but she didn't answer the phone. This sparked worry in Jason, as he couldn't understand why Christina wasn't answering his calls. Jason couldn't reach Christina, so he asked a neighbor to check on her. He told the neighbor that Christina was sick and wasn't answering her phone. The neighbor went to the house, knocked on the door, and called out to Christina, but no one answered. Since the door was unlocked, the neighbor went inside and found Christina lying on the bed. She couldn't wake Christina up, so she called 911 and then got a neighbor who was a registered nurse to help. The nurse checked Christina's pulse and confirmed that she had passed away. On September 29, 2014, 4 months after giving birth to her second child, Christina was found dead in her house. When the police arrived, Jason was already there. He told them that Christina was sick and he had left her alone in the morning. 2 days later, the medical examiner determined that Christina's death was caused by an overdose of a prohibited substance. This news shocked her family and friends. Christina, a mother of 2 young children, was found dead, and many people who knew her were shocked. They claimed she had never used illegal substances. Her mother, Kathy May, reported to the police that Christina was fine when she saw her the day before her death, contradicting her husband Jason's statement that Christina was struggling with a cold. Kathy May also revealed that Christina described her marriage to Jason as complicated. Jason was unhappy in the marriage, but didn't want a divorce because he didn't want to pay child support or lose custody of their children. The neighbors who had discovered Christina's body shared some information with the police. Apparently, Jason told them that on the evening before Christina's death, he made her cereal with milk, and while eating, she lost consciousness and dropped the plate. The police understood that it was hard for Christina's loved ones to accept that someone they knew well might have a hidden dark side. However, as the investigation progressed, the police began to doubt that Christina had used any illegal substances. Christina's family refused to give up, and they didn't believe the story. Christina's family, particularly her mother and sisters, urged the police to test her breast milk for evidence. Initially, the police delayed this request for 48 hours, but the family's persistence eventually led them to comply. This marked the first time in Michigan's history that breast milk was used as evidence in a case. Tests conducted at her workplace and the hospital where she gave birth to her second child came back negative for prohibited substances. At the time of her death, her second child was just 4 months old, and Christina was still breastfeeding both children. According to her husband, Harris, and her mother, Christina was meticulous about what she consumed because she was breastfeeding and wanted to ensure her baby's health and safety. Christina had been pumping and storing her breast milk in a freezer, with some of the frozen milk stored at her mother's house. Investigators tested 3 bags of breast milk for prohibited substances, using the dates on the bags to determine which ones were frozen before her death. The results showed no traces of banned substances in any of the milk samples. This finding suggested that Christina had not taken the substance that caused her death. Only one person, Jason's sister, had claimed that Christina had used banned substances. This statement led investigators to take a closer look at Jason and consider the possibility that Christina's death was intentional. The investigation was slow, and it's unclear how it would have progressed without the active involvement of Christina's family. Her mother, Kathy May, kept in close contact with the Davidson police, reminding them about her daughter's case. In August 2016, almost 2 years after Christina's death, Kathy May was able to get the Davidson police to turn the case over to the Michigan State Police. With new investigators on the case, the story began to unfold, revealing more information about Jason Harris's behavior before and after his wife's death. Harris was involved in multiple extramarital affairs, and Christina was aware of these infidelities. She had confided in family members and co-workers about the situation, including the fact that Harris was texting another woman while she was in the hospital giving birth to their youngest child. Christina had expressed concerns about her safety, telling a coworker that if she died, Harris would be the one responsible. When asked if she was serious, she confirmed that she was. Harris had made public statements that questioned the paternity of their second child and had complained about Christina's behavior after giving birth, saying she was depressed and refusing to work. He also complained about her nagging him. A co-worker of Harris's reported that he had made disturbing comments about Christina, including expressing a desire for her death. This co-worker described the relationship between Harris and Christina as toxic, citing frequent arguments between they. The most alarming aspect of this case is that Harris was open about his desire to get rid of Christina, and he even took steps to harm her. Unfortunately, his words and actions were not taken seriously until it was too late. Harris had attempted to poison Christina on at least 2 occasions by mixing substances into her drinks. Fortunately, Christina was able to detect the unusual taste and avoided drinking the beverages. Harris asked a coworker for a substance that would not affect the taste or smell of food and drinks, explaining that he wanted to poison Christina so she wouldn't feel anything. When he told another coworker that Christina didn't drink the water with the substance because it tasted funny, the coworker refused to give him more pills. A coworker testified that Harris told him he wanted to stop Christina from nagging him, but the coworker thought he was joking. Harris also told a coworker that he had hired someone to kill Christina, but the person was arrested before they could carry out the task. Harris then asked the coworker to kill Christina in exchange for $10,000, which would be paid from a $100,000 life insurance policy Christina had through her employer. The coworker refused the offer, believing that Harris was just venting his emotions and that the offer to kill Christina was a joke. He remembered the conversation as Harris saying something like, "I'm tired of her. I'm going to get rid of her." Back to the case, the 911 operator asked the neighbor who found Christina's body if there were any needles at the scene, but the neighbor did not see any. The neighbor, a registered nurse, testified that Christina's body was cold and stiff, had no pulse, and had a white foamy substance coming from her mouth. The neighbor did not attempt to resuscitate Christina because she was already dead. The paramedics who responded to the scene confirmed that Christina was dead. Harris told his supervisor that he had asked a neighbor to check on Christina and that he had to go home because she was unresponsive. However, witnesses reported that Harris did not appear concerned or in a hurry when he arrived at the house. Harris entered the house without speaking to the neighbor he had asked to check on Christina. Later that morning, Harris contacted Christina's supervisor at work and informed her of Christina's death. He also inquired about collecting the $100,000 life insurance policy benefit that Christina had through her job. One of the women Harris was in a relationship with told investigators that Harris contacted her on the day of Christina's death and said that his wife had died from taking too much of a banned substance. This suggests that Harris knew the cause of Christina's death before the medical examiner's report was released. Harris shared some details about the night before Christina's death, including her restless sleep, frequent coughing, and unusual comment about the chemical taste of her water. He later visited her workplace to inquire about life insurance proceeds, collecting a $20,000 death benefit and raising suspicions with his actions. A mistress also moved in with him and his children, either before or after her funeral. The mistress stated that Jason Harris's adult children from a previous marriage moved into the house just days after Christina's death. Police also found that Jason Harris had bought an airline ticket to Rhode Island 9 days after Christina's death to visit a woman he had exchanged over 5,800 texts with. The county medical examiner, Dr. Brian Hunter, submitted post-mortem blood and urine samples for testing. Although the test results were consistent with a lethal dose of the substance, There was no evidence of how the substance was administered, as there were no injection marks on her body and no powder residues or rolling paper were found near the scene of her death. Michigan State Police took over the investigation in 2016. Dr. Hunter changed the manner of death from accidental to homicide after a wrongful death action. Jason Harris was charged with first-degree murder and others. His bail was denied. Harris pleaded not guilty and will contest the charges. The prosecution eliminated the possibility of injection as the cause of death because there were no injection marks or a needle found at the scene. Dr. Judge testified that it was unlikely the substance was inhaled through the nose because there was no evidence of a rolled dollar bill or paper used for snorting. When given the opportunity to speak, Jason Harris did not apologize or express remorse. Instead, he claimed he was innocent. The jury did not believe his claims and found him guilty of the charges against him. On November 17, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for 47-year-old Harris. 3 weeks later, the court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kira Steger. Kira Steger was born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois, to parents Marcy and Jay Steger. They remembered her as a vibrant, dedicated, and kind-hearted person. At the time of her disappearance, Kira worked at 2 stores in the Mall of America, Wet Seal and Delia's. Her co-workers were not only close friends, but also like family to her. Kira had a remarkable ability to recognize people's hidden strengths and had a promising future ahead of her. However, her life took a tragic turn when she mysteriously vanished on February 21, 2013. On the day she disappeared, Kira had a shift at work and was looking forward to a dinner date with her husband, Jeffrey Trevino, at a nice restaurant after her shift ended. Kira and Jeffrey had met 3 years prior and quickly fell in love, eventually getting married. To those around them, they appeared to be a happy and stable couple, with only occasional disagreements that they kept private. Neither their relatives, friends, nor co-workers were aware of any significant issues in their relationship. On Saturday, February 23rd, Kira's co-workers became concerned when she failed to show up to work. She was known for being punctual, strict, and adhering to her schedule. When they couldn't reach Kira, they called her husband Jeffrey. According to Jeffrey, Kira had left their house the previous morning and hadn't returned. While this wasn't entirely unusual, as Kira would occasionally spend the night at a friend's or relative's house without warning, the severe snowstorm that day was a cause for concern. Jeffrey speculated that Kira's car might have gotten stuck and her phone battery could have died, leaving her unable to communicate. Jeffrey filed a missing persons report for his wife Kira after not hearing from her, and he also contacted her family to inform them of her disappearance. Her family was shocked and deeply disturbed by the news. Upon receiving the report, detectives launched an investigation into Kira's disappearance. As is standard procedure, they began by questioning Jeffrey and searching the surrounding area. Detectives visited Jeffrey at his home to ask him about Kira's disappearance. He told them that on the previous Thursday, he and Kira had spent time together, having dinner, talking, bowling, and then leaving the mall. According to Jeffrey, they went straight home after that, where Kira planned to watch a movie. Jeffrey also reported that Kira left their house the following Friday morning around 8:30 a.m. to attend a mandatory work event. He stated that Kira was acting normally and didn't appear to be behaving strangely before she left. Jeffrey wasn't concerned about Kira's frequent disappearances, despite not knowing her whereabouts. They had minor relationship issues, but Jeffrey didn't consider them serious. When questioned, he dismissed the possibility of Kira having a lover, citing a previous conversation where she denied it. Jeffrey claimed to trust and love his wife. Investigators relayed information to patrol units and visited the Mall of America to verify Jeffrey's testimony. The Mall of America in Bloomington is one of the largest shopping malls in the world. As such, the mall is equipped with multiple security cameras. Detectives investigated Kira's disappearance by reviewing the footage from the time she left work on February 21st. The footage showed nothing unusual. Jeffrey's account was confirmed, as the footage showed that he met Kira after work, and they spent time together at the mall before leaving. There were no signs of arguments or trouble. Kira's family was struggling with her disappearance, and their anxiety grew as the days passed. They decided to take action and travel to Bloomington to help with the investigation. They created flyers with her picture and posted them around town, hoping to attract attention to the search. The investigators questioned neighbors and obtained footage from a security camera that partially captured Kira and Jeffrey's home. Kira's cell phone records also became available, revealing a significant new lead. A man named Ryan Wendt, a manager at a store where Kira worked, with whom she had a long-term and intense relationship. Police investigated Ryan after learning he'd traveled out of state during Kira's disappearance, raising suspicions due to his past romantic relationship with her and their concurrent out-of-state moves. Detectives sought to determine whether his actions were coincidental or incriminating. The detectives managed to locate Ryan in Colorado and asked him to answer questions. During the questioning, Ryan stated that he had last been in contact with Kira via text messages while driving through South Dakota. He said these messages were sent shortly before Kira disappeared. The police analyzed the timing of these messages and discovered that Kira had been texting with Ryan while she was having dinner with Jeffrey. It was clear that Kira was distancing herself from Jeffrey. The investigators examined Ryan's phone and credit card records to verify his location. Their analysis indicated that Ryan was indeed out of state that evening and had no connection to Kira's disappearance. Based on this information, Ryan was eliminated as a suspect. Further analysis of the messages revealed that Kira had been texting with Ryan even after she returned home with Jeffrey. However, her phone activity ceased at 11:44 p.m., and she has not been active since. A team of investigators reviewed video footage from a surveillance camera at Kira's neighbor's house. The camera's rapid movement made it difficult to observe, but it did capture Jeffrey and Kira's house for a few seconds. According to Jeffrey, they returned home after dinner and bowling, watched a movie, and went to bed. However, the footage showed Kira's car backing into the yard at 2 a.m. and driving away, despite the poor video quality and constant motion. Jeffrey claimed he drove to the gas station to fill up Kira's car, as she had asked him to do before her commute the next day. His alibi checked out, as he was indeed seen at the gas station around 3:30 a.m. However, after leaving the gas station, he didn't return home. Instead, he headed towards the highway, but his exact destination is unknown. Although a neighbor's camera didn't capture him returning home, it's possible he may have arrived when the camera was facing a different direction. Kira's Chevrolet was seen leaving her residence at 9:21 a.m., but the driver's identity couldn't be determined. A missing person report was filed on February 23rd. On February 25th, police received a call about a suspicious vehicle near Kira's workplace. The vehicle had been parked in a multi-story parking lot for several days and was found with suspicious red smudges on the trunk lid. Kira's white Chevy was found with signs of a tragic event, including a few small bloodstains. Her purse, containing divorce court forms, was recovered from the vehicle. A rolled-up trunk mat with dark stains, later confirmed to be her blood, was discovered behind the car. The car left the house at 9:21 a.m. and was captured on camera at the mall 20 minutes later. Unfortunately, there was no camera in the parking lot where the car was eventually found, but there was a camera that captured footage of the path leading to the car. After reviewing the footage, detectives noticed a man wearing a hoodie, which was not unusual given the cold weather, walking after the car had entered the parking lot. The man crossed the street and approached a taxi stand, where he had a brief conversation with a driver before getting into the car and driving off. The police were able to identify the taxi company and determine which car the man had ridden in by tracking the time of the interaction. Since the cabs were equipped with GPS tracking devices, the police were able to determine that the man ended his trip a block away from Kira and Jeffrey's house and paid for the ride in cash before getting out of the car. As the cab drove away from the neighborhood, it was caught on camera by the same surveillance camera that had partially captured Kira and Jeffrey's residence. 2 minutes later, a man wearing a hoodie with a distinctive white logo entered the camera's frame. Although the poor video quality made it hard to discern his face, investigators suspected that the man was likely Jeffrey, given that Kira was missing and the man with the hooded sweatshirt was seen entering Kira and Jeffrey's house. Law enforcement officers executed a search warrant and visited the house, finding numerous dark red stains in the bedroom, including nearly 100 on the mattress. After rearranging and cleaning the room, investigators used luminol to reveal additional stains on the carpet that were not visible to the naked eye. The stains, which originated in the bedroom, were confirmed to be Kira's blood, leading investigators to believe she was likely no longer alive. A search of Jeffrey's car found no blood or signs of a struggle, but a gas station receipt indicated a purchase was made with his card 1 hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned. Detectives went to the gas station to review the security footage. The footage showed Jeffrey filling up his car and then going inside to withdraw cash from an ATM. This gave them a clear view of Jeffrey's face and revealed a logo on his jacket that matched the one seen on the man in the earlier footage. Based on this new evidence and the evidence found at the house, 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino was arrested. He was taken to the police station for questioning and became the main suspect. Jeffrey contacted his attorney during the interrogation and was advised to remain silent. The police had enough evidence to charge him, but needed to find Kira's body to prove his guilt. After months of searching by the police, Kira's family and volunteers, a suspicious bag was found by the side of the road at Keller Lake, near Trevino's house, as the snow began to melt in late March. A bag containing a bloodied pillow, shirt, and bra was discovered, and forensic analysis revealed that the items had Kira's DNA on them. Although the search of the lake was hindered by the presence of ice, divers searched the water body, but unfortunately, no remains were found. The area around the lake was also thoroughly searched using 4 trained search dogs, but these efforts were unsuccessful. 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, a disturbing call on May 8, 2013, led police to a body in the Mississippi River. Body was identified through dental records as Kira Steger, with severe blunt force trauma and a fractured index finger, making her exact cause of death impossible to determine due to decomposition. To uncover the truth, investigators worked to rebuild the sequence of events surrounding Kira's death. Their theory was as follows. When Kira and Jeffrey arrived home, he discovered that she was texting someone else, which made him suspicious. Kira refused to let him see the messages, leading Jeffrey to violently take her phone and break her finger in the process. Upon reading the romantic messages, Jeffrey's anger intensified, ultimately driving him to kill Kira. After committing the crime, he attempted to erase any evidence of his wrongdoing. Jeffrey used Kira's car to transport her body to a house, where he put it in the trunk. He then stopped at a gas station before driving to a river, where he disposed of the body. On his way back home, he threw away a bag containing Kira's pillow and clothes. The next day, he went to a gas station to withdraw cash from an ATM, knowing he would need it to pay for a taxi after abandoning Kira's car in a mall parking lot. After getting rid of the car, Jeffrey returned home and spent the rest of the day cleaning the house. Jeffrey's goal was to make it seem like Kira had driven away from her car on her own that morning and was unharmed. However, surveillance footage foiled his plan. In October 2013, a jury found Jeffrey Trevino guilty, agreeing that his actions were not planned in advance, but rather the result of a heated argument that escalated into violence after he discovered Kira's infidelity. Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison in November 2013. He will be eligible for parole in 2031. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Davis. Michelle Ann Corner was born on December 15, 1966 in Iowa. By 2008, she was a 41-year-old mother of 3 living in Des Moines. Her divorce from her husband, Randy Davis, was nearly finalized, and she had taken steps towards starting anew. Michelle had moved into her own apartment and obtained a restraining order against Randy. This marked a significant turning point in her life. However, the years leading up to the divorce were tumultuous for the family. Michelle, described as friendly and adventurous, with a passion for motorcycles, she was a respected and authoritative secretary at a trucking company. On September 11, 2008, Michelle having finally escaped the burdens of her troubled marriage. Colleagues noted the change in her demeanor since her separation. Michelle left work around 4:30 p.m., but her newfound freedom was short-lived. Just after she left, 911 operators began receiving calls about an accident on Interstate 235. A Mercury Sable was found upside down, with Michelle still wearing her seatbelt, unconscious in the driver's seat. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but sadly couldn't save her. Michelle Davis was pronounced dead. After arriving at the scene, the police initially believed that Michelle lost control of her vehicle, resulting in an accident. However, they quickly ruled out this theory the next day. Forensic experts determined that Michelle's death was not caused by injuries sustained during the rollover, but rather by a gunshot wound to the head. The bullet was extracted and sent for analysis in the hopes of identifying the perpetrator. As they waited for the results of the ballistic examination, local authorities took precautions to ensure public safety. They considered the possibility that Michelle was a random victim and that the shooter might strike again. To address concerns, the police increased patrols in the area. Once it was clear that Michelle's death was not an accident, detectives revisited the crime scene to search for clues. Unfortunately, their efforts yielded no results, as they found neither the cartridge case nor any other evidence to aid in the investigation. The police initially thought Michelle was the victim of a car accident, so the traffic services cleared the site, potentially destroying any evidence. Despite this, the detectives remained hopeful that they could still find answers by reviewing traffic camera recordings. These recordings often help solve cases, and this one was no exception. The investigators started studying the recordings from the traffic cameras, focusing on the one closest to the crime scene. They rewound the recording to the time when people started calling 911. After half an hour, they found what they were looking for. The video showed Michelle's car lying upside down, but the footage was of poor quality, resembling a slideshow with separate pictures and intervals between them. Michelle Davis's family was shocked when investigators revealed her death was not an accident. Her father, Michael Lee Corner, was particularly devastated, having lost another daughter, Cheryl Sue, in 1965 at just 1 year old, and now dealing with the loss of a second child. Michelle's family described her life as having changed significantly in recent times. Despite having no financial problems, they suspected that her husband, Randy Davis, might have been involved in her death. Their divorce was almost finalized, and Michelle had filed a restraining order against Randy. This revelation led the investigators to consider Randy as a potential suspect. Meanwhile, another detective spoke with Michelle's colleagues at her workplace and discovered that she had been in a close relationship with a man named Matt Jorgensen, who was also a colleague. This new information added another suspect to the investigation, as the police sought to understand the complex circumstances surrounding Michelle's death. According to Michelle's friend, Michelle and Matt Jorgensen had mutual feelings for each other. However, since Michelle was going through a divorce from Randy Davis, they kept their relationship private only sharing it with close friends and colleagues. When investigators spoke with Matt, he openly discussed his relationship with Michelle and provided a detailed account of his whereabouts on the day of her death. He claimed they never had any arguments or fights. The police verified his alibi, and he was subsequently eliminated as a suspect. The ballistic examination revealed that the murder weapon was a .22 caliber rifle, and experts determined that the shot was fired at close range. Given that the crime occurred on the interstate, the police believed the shooter was likely in another vehicle that was driving alongside Michelle's car. This new information led to the emergence of a new suspect in the case. The police received a tip from Michelle's insurance company that her brother Todd was seeking payment, raising suspicions of a life insurance-motivated crime. A detective visited Todd's house to investigate. When the detective started asking Todd about his whereabouts on the day of Michelle's death, Todd realized he was a suspect. He explained that he was in a different part of the city at the time of her death, and that the family was struggling financially. Todd said he had turned to the insurance company because he needed the money to pay for Michelle's funeral. The police verified Todd's alibi and found that he was not in the area where Michelle was killed. This ruled him out as a suspect, but Todd provided information that led the police to investigate another suspect, Josh. Josh was the son of Randy from a previous marriage and was an adult at the time of Michelle's death. A Marine named Josh had recently returned home from the Army when a tragic event occurred. Michelle was fatally wounded in a car incident, and the police considered Josh a suspect due to his military background. As the investigation continued, a woman reported witnessing something on Interstate 235 on the same day and time as the incident. A witness reported seeing a red Ford F-150 pickup truck driven by a white man in a baseball cap who was driving erratically, swerving between lanes, and appeared to be chasing someone. This new information led investigators to re-examine traffic camera footage, focusing on finding a red pickup truck in the area. The footage confirmed the witness's account, showing a red pickup truck following Michelle from her workplace. Although the footage was not clear enough to reveal the driver's face or the truck's license plate, further review of other camera recordings revealed that the truck was consistently following Michelle's route, staying close behind her as she approached the location of her death. This evidence suggested that the perpetrator likely fired the fatal shot from the truck while driving. Detectives investigating Michelle's death had several suspects in mind and soon discovered that her husband, Randy Davis, owned a red pickup truck. They immediately visited his house but found only his son, Josh, who was a Marine trained in handling weapons and had access to his father's vehicle. Josh claimed that on the day of Michelle's death, he went shopping with his sister and then spent the evening at home watching TV. However, detectives found Josh's alibi suspicious. According to Josh, the divorce proceedings between Michelle and his father were challenging, partly due to Michelle's demand for half the house's value. Josh also stated that his father arrived home around 5:30 p.m. that day. The conversation with Josh revealed that he might have had a motive for the crime, as he was upset about Michelle trying to take part of his inheritance during the divorce. This led detectives to view Josh as a potential suspect with a possible motive. Meanwhile, the police canvassed shops and gas stations along the route from Michelle's workplace to the crime scene, hoping to find additional surveillance footage. Their efforts paid off when they discovered crucial footage at a store just a few miles from Michelle's workplace. On September 11, 2008, the day Michelle died, a red pickup truck arrived at the store at around 4 p.m. The truck was registered to Randy Davis. The police needed to determine who was driving it that day. Security footage showed the driver getting out of the truck and entering the store, but the poor video quality made it impossible to identify whether it was Josh or Randy. The man disappeared from view for a while, then reappeared, made a purchase, and left the store. It's worth noting that this all happened at 4 p.m., while Michelle left work at 4:30 p.m. The police continued to analyze the footage and found that the pickup truck returned to the store several times over the next 30 minutes, but the driver didn't get out of the truck on these subsequent visits. The truck's final appearance near the store coincided with Michelle leaving work. Despite being unable to identify the suspect, the police tried to contact Randy Davis again. This time, he responded and came to the police station. The investigators informed Randy of his rights and made it clear that he was not under arrest. Randy agreed to cooperate and answer some questions. When asked about his activities on September 11th, Randy mentioned that he was going through a difficult divorce with his wife Michelle, with whom he had been married for 17 years. Randy claimed to have worked as a carpenter and was at work on the day of the incident. When questioned about his return time, Randy initially hesitated before stating that he arrived home at 3:45 p.m. However, this statement contradicted the surveillance footage and Josh's testimony, which indicated that Randy arrived home around 5:30 p.m. Randy further stated that he didn't leave his home after 3:45 p.m. and was home alone until Josh joined him to cook dinner together. However, this information conflicted with Josh's testimony, which stated that he was already home when Randy arrived. The alibis of Randy and Josh were intertwined, and investigators realized that one of them was not telling the truth. To test Randy's reaction, investigators informed him that Michelle had died from a bullet wound, not from injuries sustained in a car crash. Randy showed little reaction to this news, pretending to be surprised and lowering his eyes. When investigators asked him when he last saw Michelle, Randy requested a lawyer, which ended the conversation. The investigation was lacking in crucial evidence, including the weapon used to take Michelle's life, so Randy Davis was released. On September 15, 2008, Michelle's family and friends gathered to pay their respects at her funeral. Randy Davis attended the ceremony, putting on a show of grief, including bursting into tears. The investigators were working hard to find the answer. Unexpectedly, Josh Davis, Randy's son, walked into the police station with his lawyer and offered to make a statement. According to Josh, his father's car was parked in the driveway when he returned home from his sister. On September 11, 2008, Randy Davis committed a horrific act of violence. His wife, Michelle, had filed for divorce and was seeking part of the property in the divorce proceedings. Randy was unable to accept this and decided to take drastic measures. According to his son Josh, Randy had been planning this act of violence and had even told Josh that he was going to do something that would make Michelle regret it. Josh tried to stop his father, but Randy was determined to carry out his plan. Randy parked his red pickup truck outside the store where Michelle worked and waited for her to leave. He drove past the store several times, making sure not to miss the moment. When Michelle left work, Randy followed her and eventually found the right moment to strike. He rolled down the passenger side window and fired, shooting Michelle. Josh's testimony was crucial in the investigation, and the police were able to arrest Randy Davis based on the information he provided. The incident was also captured on the store's CCTV footage, which showed Randy's truck parked outside the store several times before the shooting. Randy Davis was initially charged with first-degree charges for the death of Michelle, but he made a deal to plead guilty to second-degree deprivation of life in exchange for a reduced sentence. As a result, Davis was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 2010. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michelle Anglin. Michelle Anglin was born on November 27, 1973, in Fountain Valley, California. Later, her family moved to Arizona, where she was raised by her mother, Peggy, and stepfather, Larry McCall. Michelle had two older sisters, Cindy and Christina. When Michelle was around 20 years old, she started dating Hudson England, and their relationship blossomed. They made each other happy, and when Hudson proposed, Michelle accepted without hesitation. In late 1995, they got married in a joyous ceremony surrounded by their families and friends. Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, was also a realtor. According to Michelle's mother, it was she who inspired Michelle to enter the real estate industry. Michelle's family would regularly keep in touch with her via her work phone when she was in the office. When showing houses to clients, Michelle always carried a pager, allowing her loved ones to reach her if needed. However, on February 9, 1996, Michelle did not respond to calls and messages from her family. She would usually inform someone about her plans to show a house to a potential buyer. The job of a realtor can be fraught with risk, often exceeding that of other professions. This is due in part to the nature of their work, which often involves working alone and visiting isolated locations to show properties. Predators often target realtors, luring them to empty homes with false intentions, such as feigning interest in buying a house. Once the realtor is alone and vulnerable, the predator can take advantage of the situation. Concern for this inherent danger led Michelle's family to become worried when they couldn't contact her during the day. Michelle's sister Cindy sought assistance from her boyfriend, a member of the Phoenix Police, who offered to perform a welfare check on Michelle. When he visited her workplace, he discovered Michelle's parked car, which seemed undisturbed. When Cindy's boyfriend entered the office, he found the lights on and music playing. However, a closer look revealed that Michelle's personal belongings, including her purse and pager, were still on a table in the unlocked office. This raised questions about why she had left in such a hurry, abandoning her belongings behind. That evening, Michelle's family filed a missing persons report with the police. Earlier that day, Michelle had an appointment with a potential buyer to show them 3 houses near her office. Since the houses were close to her office, she decided not to use her car. When the police arrived, they inspected Michelle's office and then visited the 3 houses she might have shown the buyer. During their initial search, they found 3 pink buttons in the master closet on the 2nd floor of one of the houses. They also noticed that 2 candles in the master bathroom had been knocked over, one into each sink, but everything else seemed undisturbed. Cindy's boyfriend asked her about Michelle's outfit, as police found buttons they suspected belonged to her. Cindy couldn't recall. A search of the houses, especially where the buttons were found, led to a tragic discovery that Michelle's body under the master bed. Investigation revealed seminal fluid, broken candlesticks, Michelle's clothes, and paint and plaster chips under the bed and in the bathroom. The forensic examination found no evidence of forced intimate contact before Michelle's death. However, it suggested the perpetrator intended to do so, undressing Michelle despite her resistance. Bruises on her neck indicated she was strangled while fighting back. The violent confrontation occurred in the master closet and bath, as shown by scattered buttons, seminal fluid, damaged candles, and broken ceramic chips. During the attack, Michelle's clothing was torn off, as evident by her tattered and interwoven clothes. Her body showed multiple signs of the intense struggle, numerous bruises and abrasions on her body, defensive wounds on her hands and wrists. Michelle's desperate fight to defend herself against her assailant ultimately proved futile. After her daughter's death, Peggy spoke out about the safety concerns facing women who work alone, including real estate agents in model homes and open houses. As a result of her vocal advocacy, Peggy claims to have been fired from her job. The police's first lead in the investigation was Michelle's husband, Hudson England. It's standard procedure for law enforcement to initially investigate family members to determine if they were involved in the crime. Michelle's family, however, did not suspect Hudson, as they were a happy couple who had married just 4 months prior to her death. Nevertheless, the investigators decided to look into Hudson's alibi. When questioned by the police, Hudson appeared genuinely distraught over Michelle's death. He claimed to have spent the day visiting several car dealerships in search of a family vehicle, as they were planning to start a family. The police verified his alibi and found it to be true, ultimately ruling him out as a suspect. During the investigation, he stated that he had no idea who would want to harm Michelle and speculated that she was likely attacked by someone she was showing a house to. To further investigate, the police reviewed Michelle's phone records and discovered that on February 9th, between 3:45 and 4:15 p.m., she was on a call with a fellow sales agent. Michelle abruptly ended the call, stating that a potential buyer had arrived at the subdivision. The fellow agent attempted to call Michelle back between 4:30 and 5 p.m., but the calls went unanswered. This information allowed detectives to narrow down the time frame of the attack, but they still needed to identify the person Michelle was supposed to meet. Unfortunately, Michelle had not mentioned the potential buyer's name during the phone conversation, nor had she written it in her work notes, leaving the police without any immediate leads on the identity of the mysterious individual. The police investigation into the attack on Michelle involved interviewing people who lived in the area where the incident occurred. One resident, who happened to be returning home from work between 4 o'clock and 4:45 p.m. on February 9th, reported seeing a white man coming down the steps of one of the 3 houses for sale in the neighborhood. This witness also noticed a black, full-sized, older model Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates parked in the lot of the house. Additionally, several potential buyers who visited the subdivision that day between 4 o'clock and 4:30 p.m. reported seeing a man walking from the direction of the second and third model homes. They also observed that candlesticks in the master bathroom of the third model home had been knocked over into the sinks. Kim Ramos, a young real estate sales associate from a nearby subdivision, contacted the police after hearing the news. She reported that on February 9th, the same day Michelle's body was found at around 2 p.m., she had met with a potential buyer who drove an old black Chevrolet pickup truck. Kim found it suspicious that he was interested in a $500,000 house, but drove a vehicle that suggested a more modest lifestyle. When Kim accompanied he to a 2-story house, supposedly to answer his questions, she became uneasy. He stood too close to her and casually touched her hand several times, making her wary. After spending only a brief time with him, Kim returned to the sales office, feeling that his questions about the house, such as the type of flooring and the possibility of adding a 4th bedroom, seemed unnecessary and even foolish. Ms. Ramos played a crucial role in the investigation by asking the suspicious client to fill out a guest registration card, which he reluctantly completed. The client, who claimed to be James Adams, provided his real home address and phone number. When police visited the address, they spotted a black Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates parked outside. The truck was registered to 32-year-old James Van Adams, who was not at home at the time. Police took photos of the truck and showed them to Kim, who confirmed that it was the same vehicle driven by the suspicious client she had met just hours before Michelle's death. Further investigation into James Van Adams' background revealed that Adams was a 32-year-old man who was currently separated from his wife and had a child. He had a prior conviction in California for a crime committed in 1990. In that case, Adams had targeted Melissa Cunningham, a petite sales agent who was working alone at an apartment complex. He had asked her to show him model homes that were still under construction, specifically expressing interest in a 2-story home with a master bedroom and bathroom upstairs. This event further increased suspicions about Adams. Investigating Michelle England's death led detectives to quickly uncover a previous failed attack by James Adams. They obtained a search and arrest warrant, returned to Adams' home, and took him in for questioning. However, Adams refused to cooperate, appeared nervous, and had noticeable injuries on his face, including under his eye. The detectives suspected that these injuries might have been sustained when Michelle defended herself with the missing candlesticks, which were later found. As a result, they collected DNA, blood, and hair samples from Adams. A witness, Kim Ramos, identified him and reported that he had no visible injuries on his face during their meeting. Adams claimed his injuries came from working on his pickup truck, but work records showed he left early on February 9th and didn't return, citing car troubles. When seen next, he had a new facial injury and black eye, which his employer and coworker said weren't there before. The police analysis of Adams' DNA, blood, and hair samples is detailed in court documents, which also reference a sample of seminal fluid found on the carpet in the closet. The Phoenix Crime Lab and DPS Lab conducted DNA testing on a carpet sample. Initially, results excluded James Van Adams, but retesting by the crime lab and further testing included him as a contributor. Despite the police taking extensive fingerprint and footprint evidence from the model home, none of the prints matched Adams. Adams was charged with the murder of Michelle England and denied any involvement in the crime. His trial began on July 1, 1997. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence that they claimed linked Adams to Michelle's death. One key witness was Kim Ramos, who believed she had narrowly escaped being attacked by Adams herself. Ramos testified that Adams had shown suspicious behavior, including wearing casual clothing, driving an old vehicle, and asking unusual questions about the house's flooring and fourth bedroom. Prosecutors also presented evidence of Adams' interactions with other sales agents in California and Briarwood, which they claimed showed a pattern of suspicious behavior. Susan Wright, an employee, met with Adams multiple times. Their first meeting was in September or October 1995, when Adams asked Wright to show him a house. Wright recalled Adams standing too close and not asking questions about the house. On November 5, 1995, James Van Adams visited Susan's office again, signing in as Jim Adams. This was not an incident, as Adams had repeatedly visited her office and called her, asking her out on dates. A pattern of behavior emerged, revealing Adams' deliberate plan of action. Adams targeted women with similar characteristics, attacking them in California in 1990. Victims Michelle, Susan Wright, Kim Ramos, and Melissa Cunningham worked alone in shared physical traits. Attacks occurred in the afternoon, with Adams often asking victims to accompany him upstairs in a two-story house. He used a similar method, putting his right arm around their necks, ripping off their clothes, and attempting to assault them. The trial was a challenging experience for Michelle's family, who were present throughout the proceedings. The judge had to invite Michelle's mother to go out from the courtroom because she was overcome with emotion and yelled at Adams. However, Adams appeared to take pleasure in the family's distress, occasionally flashing a grin. Nevertheless, his demeanor changed when the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts on July 14, 1997, and he was subsequently sentenced to death. Following the sentencing, Adams launched a series of appeals, claiming he was innocent. In his appeal, he argued that a previous incident in California in 1990, in which Melissa Cunningham escaped, supported his claim that he did not intentionally try to kill Michelle. Adams alleged that during the California attack, he had simply restrained his victim by the neck in an attempt to make intimate contact. He insisted that this incident demonstrated that he did not plan to kill Michelle, and the jury should have considered this when reaching their verdict. James Van Adams' attempts to appeal his death sentence were denied, and on March 14, 2005, he took his own life while in prison. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death was asphyxia, consistent with suicide. The news of his death brought relief to the family of Michelle,